Loud enough for the back? I don't have a mic for the back, so I will just speak loudly. I also have my beverages with me because I have a cold, so caffeine to stay awake and water so that I don't get dry mouth. So thank you for having me. I'm going to probably pivot from this position and over there because this projector is very bright and I can't see. So I'm not wanting to get closer to you, but I just can't see when I do. So I'm going to stay up here. Sally, thank you for that introduction. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I hope this afternoon is really worthwhile. I hope you do leave with something that you can use right away. I hope it's either something that you can do new, something you can go back and ask questions about, or something that you can use to reinforce your argument on why you should do something or why you shouldn't. We're going to get started in just a minute, kind of social media management made easy. I hope the easy part isn't overselling it. I think it's easy. I'll give you some really good tips and ways that I do it. A little bit about me for those who don't know. I work for the university in university communication, and I manage the university's social media presence on 10 platforms. So I create the content, publish the content, engage with different users across those 10 platforms. So anything and everything kind of coming from @you and Lincoln is either me or a product of mine with some of the interns that I am lucky enough to work with. That most of them attend this college on the campus. So any of you who are looking for internships in the future, let me know. I'm sure there's plenty of people in the room as well that have internships that would give you a really good work experience. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of a roadmap. I do want to use this more as a workshop. I teach a class, and I already lectured this morning, so I don't want to lecture again. I want this to be a conversation. Those of you who do know me, if I don't hear anybody raise their hand, I'll call on you. So lucky you. And we're going to walk through this roadmap, and there will be some breaks, but if you need to get up to use the bathroom, get a drink, get some more food, please do. Come and go as you need to. It won't distract me. I'm just going to keep on going. If I speak too quickly and need me to repeat anything, or if you have a question, please raise your hand. I want this to be a dialogue. I don't want to talk to you for the next 3 hours because I don't think that's what you're here for. I think you're here to learn. I'm here to learn. I personally don't love the word expert because I don't feel like I'm ever going to be an expert. I just have a lot of experience doing this every day. So as you have ideas, please challenge me, and I will not be offended. I want to learn too. So hopefully this can be a really good dialogue, and we can just get started. So kind of our roadmap, where we're going to start. All of you should have received a sheet on your way in. If you didn't, it's okay. We'll get you one. But we're really going to talk through these kind of bulleted points. Social media goals and audience identification. I am going to take it back a little bit before we just go into tactical things, because if you don't have a good strategy or plan, you're not going to be really it's not going to help you as much without it. We're going to look at channel selection and content planning, then content creation, content deployment, and content analysis. So we're really going to start at the beginning and work all the way through. We have time, we have conversation, so I'm going to get started. Has anybody ever seen this quote? Or maybe heard this one? Or this? So this question is a high five, not a stop. It's a high five for you. How many people have heard some of those statements? Were all of them really positive? No. Probably not. So I bring those statements up because to me, social media is another tactic, but it oftentimes gets overshadowed with actual lack of strategy or lack of planning. We wouldn't just send an email out to our constituents, our members, or anything without somebody, probably 4 or 5 people checking it. So why are we jumping into a new pool just because we can? We really have to take that step back and think about what are our goals and who's our audience. So we're going to talk through both of those things first just to kind of set us up for today. But I really think those are the most important things. That's why they're at the top of that sheet that I gave you. These are things I stress for every piece of communication. I don't think it's just a social media thing specific. I think you should always be thinking about what are your goals and who are your audience and how are you going to get to those. Because those are questions that I get asked on why we're going to do something new. How do we divert resources to something if we don't have a goal and we don't have an audience? As you're trying to think through your strategy, maybe you have too much or you have too little, but these are really good research points to help make your argument better. Bless you. So what are your social media goals? Does anybody want to shout out goals? Ideas? This also gives me a drink break. Engage your audience. You can just shout. I don't need hands. Broaden your audience. Sales. Conversions. Awareness. Any other ideas, goals?
Increase internal support
Internal support.
Inform and educate.
Personality, inform and educate. Brand. Followers or subscribers. So all really good things. So we're going to have a break in a second to really think about those, and hopefully you can write them out, because that's one thing I would like you to leave today with, is thinking through your goals. If you have them, let's jot them down. If you don't, let's make a sticky note that says we're going to do that this week or early next week before Thanksgiving. So ultimately, the questions that you should ask yourself: what do you want your social media efforts to accomplish? What will putting out a post on Twitter do for you or your organization? Ultimately, we want to be thinking consumers first or audience first. So what are they going to get out of this piece of communication? Why are we adding photos on Instagram? Why are we making posts on Facebook? Why is somebody writing a blog post and then tweeting it out? What is that content doing for your organization? What are the goals of those pieces of content? It's also okay to have multiple goals. Each of your channels can have individual goals. Each piece of individual communication can have a goal. I often refer to this, and we'll get into this in the analysis piece, but if you put out a link to have people RSVP for an event, the goal is to have them RSVP for the event. So it doesn't really matter if 1 million people like it, if 1 million people share it, if your event nobody shows up to. So to me, that piece of content has a goal, and you might be using a social media platform as part of the tactical way to get people to know about it. So awareness, building a brand, connecting with a larger audience, all of those are, to me, applicable goals depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And I know we have some people in here who are B2B, nonprofit, consumer, some are students. So as a student, if you don't have an organization to kind of think from in the framework when we talk, think about yourself. How are you going to position yourself for a job? Or how are you going to position yourself to either get a job, or when you go looking for a job? These are the types of questions that you should be asking employers, because it'll make you seem really smart, and maybe they'll hire you to solve the problem. So be thinking about that. How will you justify time and resource spent? So I, at the university, am one of the only few people lucky enough to have the title of social media in my title. Most people wear 14 different hats, and it's another requirement of their really, really busy job. I get to focus on this, and this is why I have this presentation, to make it easier for those who don't. But really, how are we going to divert more resources? Is it time? Is it money? What else can we get out of this? What is our main goal? I think social media should never be free. I really do not like when people say it's free, because to me, my time on anything is worth something. And I really encourage you to never say it's free. Yes, it's free to make a post, but ultimately somebody has to spend time on that, and they're not spending time on something else. So you really have to think about it, especially when your boss comes and says, we need to cut costs, we need to understand what you're doing with all your day. You tweet all day, you set it on Facebook. Yes, I do. But I can tell you exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and what it's doing for the institution. So I encourage all of you to think back through your goals and make sure that you can have that path to show your success, because nobody wants to be doing things without a return. There's no point in doing something if it's not going to accomplish a goal, in my opinion. So my pro tip, I have a lot of pro tips. This is a high five as well. Post your goals in your office. Display them somewhere so you can see them, other people can see them, you can reflect on them. To me, goals are never permanent. Please don't etch them in stone or get them made in metal, because they will probably change. Just print them out on a piece of paper and put them on your whiteboard or a sticky note. What are your goals? What do you want to accomplish? Even if it's just for a week or a month and then they change. I think having your goals out in front of you helps you move towards them. It's a good conversation starter if people come into your office and start asking questions. They see that you're thinking strategically. Social media is a strategic communications channel or channels. It's just part of the bigger mix. It's not its own. I couldn't do anything in my department without any of the other groups, our photography and videography and our news group, our PR group, marketing. We all have to work together. I'm just one piece of that really important puzzle. So colleagues seeing this, they should be able to ask you questions. You should encourage them to see this. I think all of us should have professional goals posted somewhere so that we can constantly be evaluating what we're doing each day. To me, this is a motivation piece. This is are we going in the right direction? I love social media and digital media in general, because if we're not going in the right direction, it doesn't cost too much to back up and try again or pivot and move around. I didn't just print 500 postcards. I didn't just send out something that I have hard costs on. If something doesn't work, you can change it, and you can measure your success the whole way through. So this is where I look at my goals. They're always evolving and changing, and I encourage you to kind of think about that. We're going to get to you, have a break to think about it too. So who is your audience? Who are you trying to reach? Anybody want to share their audience? Specific audiences? Ty? Say that louder. Referring doctors. Lindsay? Parents? Employees? Prospective students? Current UNL students? I like that one in the sense that it's specific. Current UNL students, not just current students. Not that that's wrong, because everybody has different audiences. But as you can be more specific with your audience, you will have a better chance at connecting the right platform with the right message to the right person. So I encourage you to increase that funnel as much as you can to really be specific, because then you can figure out, does that a post for Facebook or Twitter? Well, who's the audience? What's the goal? What do we want it to do? So as specific as you can get, that's kind of my greatest recommendation. There is definitely some need for wide net. You still have to be pretty broad in some communication. Not everything can be specific, but if you have that opportunity, like we do with Snapchat, we know that's current students and probably prospective students. There's probably some outliers, but most of our messaging is really focused around campus. It's not necessarily focused around some of the bigger things that we're doing that we're trying to make a global impact with. So some questions to ask yourself or to think about as we go into this. Who do you want to reach with your messaging? And be specific if you can. So I'm going to pick on Nancy because I know her audience a little bit. You want to talk about your audience? Like Lincoln is where most of your complexes are. Or do you have Omaha too? We have Omaha. So we have Omaha and Lincoln residents looking for apartments and townhomes and all of those. So she knows her geography. She knows where she's focusing. She's not going to necessarily need wide net for different areas or different populations. She can target her ads on Facebook. She can target her posts about Omaha listings in Omaha, because people in Lincoln probably don't need to see those. But unless you take the step back and really think about where your audience is, you can't leverage the tool more. I think Facebook is one of the better tools for targeting. It's one of the ones that allows you to target for free. It's really easy to pick geography, and it's an area that people put a lot of information out. They tell you where they live. So if you have that information publicly displayed, you can then target those people, and you can make those choices. So as you're trying to run a campaign or a piece of messaging, it doesn't hurt if Lincoln people hear about apartments in Omaha, but it's probably not going to move and accomplish her goals. The reach on that post is probably not as important as the actual clicks or focus on the Omaha people versus Lincoln people. It's okay to have multiple audiences. I think audiences shift throughout the year. I think audiences shift based on platform. And the best thing about audiences, if you already have a social media presence, you can look at that. Facebook, again, is one of those really nice tools that you can go back and you can see who your audience is. What's their gender? Where do they live? What's their economic status? How much schooling have they had? We provide a lot of people a lot of information. So if you're going to provide it, why don't we use it and leverage it and actually communicate with it? So if we know our demographics, that's way more helpful than trying to do it blind. And it's okay to start with some group. Maybe you don't have a really focused target just yet. Pick one. Pick a target, pick a demographic, and try it. Like I mentioned a little while ago, digital allows you to do this, and if it's not working, change it and try something new. So you don't have to necessarily commit to an audience, but you have to start figuring out who is your audience. Again, it's who we want, but also who is it. We have to look at the data, because maybe we want to target UNL students, but most of the people following us go to Doane, or they're in high school, or they're prospective UNL students. Doesn't mean that we should isolate them or exclude them, but we can't say, yes, we had so many likes on that post. Well, they're all from our friends that work here. Great. That's not accomplishing the goal, unless your goal is just to get enough likes, which to me is not really a business goal.
Tyler, you talked about demographics.
Mm-hmm.
Back just a little bit to
Sure.
that. So on Facebook, you said targeting is easier. So on Facebook, can you target racial, gender, probably gender, but racial?
Racial, not as much, I don't think. Somebody could double check that for me. I do a lot more wide net with Facebook than targeted. I don't know if racial is one of the options that you provide. Yes, sir. He might have an answer.
Yeah, I just read a paper about this. For a brief time, Facebook, actually we don't know how long they had it, but they had what they call racial affinity marketing. But they removed it recently because that's illegal under the Civil Rights Act of 1968.
So no. You cannot. It's illegal. You do not have those rights.
Is your article out? Is it out? Is your article out?
No,
Perfect. See? Connection. I'm done. Just kidding. Your audience will evolve. It can't always be static, and it's not always what we think it is. We have to look at it. Pay attention to the analytics to really understand it. There's often times where I think we are heavily one thing, and then I look at the analytics and we're completely opposite, or sometimes I'm right on target. But you have the analytics at your fingertips, so I encourage you to look at them. Check in on them as often as you think it's necessary. As you're working on things where you can actually target, or you're trying to figure out, how do I say this? Looking at the data is at your fingertips. Try it and see how well it performs. Maybe there's other options to A/B test things as well. I encourage you, just don't ever forget about your audience, because that's why we're sharing content. It's for them, it's not for us. Even when my boss comes and says we need to share this message, that's great. I know what the message is, but then it's my job to tailor it for the audience so that they will interact with it. And we'll talk a little bit about that in content creation in just a minute. But it doesn't mean we can't reach them. We just have to try to figure out the best way to reach them. And understanding what the audience wants and needs is really important as you're moving forward with your strategy. So really simple math, goals plus audience, to me, is the social media channels that you should be using. If you know your goal and you know your audience, there is plenty of things to look at in third-party research to understand where people are at. I had an example this week where their goal was to get a lot of people to click on a link, and they wanted to use Instagram to do that. What's the problem with that right now? I can't see where it's coming, but it sounds like it's echoing. Louder? Instagram, as of now, does not have a direct link. So if you're trying to lead a lot of people, generate leads for business, get people to read a story, watch a longer video because your video can only be 1 minute, it doesn't mean you can't use Instagram for that. It just means you have to think through that strategy a little bit different because you don't have the main conversion, which is click on that link. So you really have to understand what is your goal of your content, who is your audience, and then figure out which channels make the most sense. This is oftentimes where we have multiple channels. I have some channels I use all the time and other channels that I use just a few times a week or once a month. But each piece of content has its own individual goal, and I know where the audience is and how I can actually deliver that message. Or if you're on a channel and you have to deliver a message slightly different, you can. Maybe you get a bit.ly or a shortened link where you can't judge how many people clicked on it, but maybe it will be clean and really easy to copy and paste or type into a browser. I wouldn't lead with Instagram if clicking on a link is your strategy, but really understanding what the channels can do and how they can help you accomplish your goals. Again, you have to know your goals and you have to know your audience before you pick those channels. That's my recommendation. That's where I spend most of my time consulting is, does it make sense for your goals and your audience before you jump into the pool? Because social media takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and in a sense, you're dedicating resources away from something else. So if you can put more resources behind things that are working, how many of us would do that? Put more resources behind what's working. And then cancel resources on things that aren't. Probably the rest of us. So, quick break. I just want you guys, you have a notepad or a piece of paper, but I want you to leave with, what are your social media goals? So if you don't have them, that's okay. Think about them. Make that a sticky note. Give yourself a reminder. What are your goals? Who is your audience? And which channels do you currently use? Which channels are already out there with your brand on them, or your organization, or your personal channels that you use? These are 3 things I'd like you to leave with, because even if you don't have your goals now or you don't know who your audience is, that will help you make those decisions when you go back to your office or your home, wherever you go back after you leave here. So we're going to take about 2 minutes just so people can kind of take some notes. Just another minute. Are we good to go, or somebody need another minute? Alrighty. So my pro tip for this one is the key to identifying which social channels to use is knowing how they work. If you don't fully understand how the channel works, it's really hard to add it to your arsenal of communications channels. It's really hard to really leverage all the pieces and parts that have how it works if you don't take a step back and understand how it works. And I strongly encourage you, if it's something even you don't use personally, there's plenty of blog posts. There's plenty of people writing about how to use it. You can YouTube it. You can Google it. You can find a way to understand how the platform works and see if that makes sense for your business. You can also really look at your competitors. Are your competitors using the tool? How are they leveraging it? Are there things that you can borrow? Are there ideas that you can do better? That's where I look a lot. I look at other Big Ten schools and see what they're doing and then make the judgment call on would that work for us here at Nebraska. And sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But at least I'm seeing how other people are thinking through. I don't understand their strategy necessarily because I'm not in those conversations. But at least I can see the platform in use. I didn't use Snapchat personally before I launched one for the university. But I saw enough I read enough articles. I saw enough videos. I talked to some students and we tried it. It worked and it is working for the audience. But ultimately, doing a little bit of research about how the platforms work is really in your best interest to make a strategic decision on which channels that you should be adding on or continuing to use. I'm not saying to delete anything today, but as you're working through, maybe there are some channels that don't make as much sense for you to spend your time on or other people in your department. Or maybe they disappear like Vine. Is anybody really committed to Vine? One? Yeah. Well, I mean, there's plenty of people that love it. There's people who made their whole living off of it. So now I'm a little worried for them because they can't be Vine stars anymore because Vine's dying. So say a small prayer for them. But that's a good explanation of we can't put all of our eggs in one basket as we move forward. We usually have to have a multi-channel approach, but it doesn't mean you have to be on all channels. Not everybody in here needs a Pinterest page. Pinterest is really important in some audiences and not so much in others. But there's always ways to think through that. So big thing right now, we're going to move into like content planning. So my next hand up is, how many of you actually plan your content before you post it like way ahead of time? So let's say a week ahead of time. 2 weeks ahead of time. 3 weeks ahead of time. 4 month. I guess that's a month. More than a month. I got 2. Oh, you guys are gonna. I don't have a prize. I'm sorry. How much? How far in advance?
At least 1 to 2 months.
1 to 2 months.
Yeah.
Do you want to share? Is that for clients or for?
It's for clients.
Okay.
So I work for an advertising agency. We run multiple channels for multiple clients, and so getting their content in front of them, having them make decisions if we need to plan out anything, if we need to get any assets, it's super important to have that planned out ahead of time so that we are being as efficient as possible.
Yeah. I would say, especially with agencies or I'm going to say larger organizations, you have a lot more hands in the pot, so you have to be planned so that everybody can participate. How many of us are in like the 1 week boat? About 1 week we plan out. And then how many were 2 weeks? 3? So we're all within like about 2 weeks to a month planning out. So ultimately, I think with content planning, again, you have to go to what are your goals? What do you want to accomplish in that next month? What's coming up? Are you working on regular weekly content, or are there campaigns? And campaigns necessarily aren't paid. I know that word has one connotation. I look at campaigns as like packages of content that are similar or have a lot of messaging around something. So trying to get people to a First Friday event, you have all of these posts around that. To me, that's a campaign. That's how I'll talk about it. It doesn't necessarily mean an advertising campaign where there's a lot of money spent and it's multi-channel and multi-platform and those things. It's just like content that's moving across, maybe it's posted more than one time across channels. So I like resources on this. Sally asked at the beginning that I provide a few resources as we go, and I'm happy to talk more about in depth of how I do this as we have this conversation, and I can send this PowerPoint out after as well. But for us, our content calendars used to live in Excel. It's a really great platform, really simple platform that most of us in the room can raise our hand and say we've used and had the experience. We've moved all of that into Google Docs, very similar format, but it allows us to edit real time. It allows us to share it. I work with interns that come in the office and interns that work from home, interns that work from their phone, and we can access everything from a Google Doc. We know who logged in and who edited things, which is really helpful for versions. So you're no longer sending a version and saying, oh crap, which version did you edit? Which version did I have? We overrode those versions. We can make links live. So we actually will write out content, add photos in a folder, and then link to that folder and say, this is the imagery that we want to use. Everybody can see what's living on in that document and edit it real time. It's all tracked by the person because they have to log into their Gmail account or Yahoo account. But it really allows us to streamline. Google Docs is also free. So for us, that's a tool that we utilize because we don't necessarily have to put budget dollars towards a plan like that. We organize ours weekly. So we have a sheet for a month, and then each tab at the bottom is a week so that we can not be overwhelmed with content. I've seen it in a lot other versions. I think there's months versions. I've seen versions where each tab is a different platform depending on how much volume of content you're creating. I just encourage you to look at Google Docs if that's not something. Are there other tools people use for content planning that you want to share? Is Google Docs and Excel the only two?
We use Basecamp.
Basecamp to plan the content?
We upload content to it. You can upload new versions at each time, so it'll tell you each time a new version has been uploaded over the previous one.
Perfect. So Basecamp. I have some other examples on the next few slides as well. Other ideas for content planning? Yes, sir.
Been using Hootsuite in the class.
Hootsuite works really, really well. So I'll talk more about Hootsuite in a little bit, but Hootsuite's really great in platform. I tend to write a lot of things outside of those tools because I have a lot of hands in the pot, and I don't necessarily, those hands don't always have permission to publish. So this is a way that everything can be gathered in one place. I can still review, I can still edit, I can make changes, I can provide feedback. I also manage some clients on campus, so I have interns writing and creating content. We'll send it to a client to add notes or feedback, and then we'll actually schedule and publish the posts. But Google Docs is our kind of easy way to do that. People are really familiar with it. And again, it's free and easy to get into and easy to replicate each month. And people can see exactly what's going to go out without it actually going out in case we have to make some changes. We also have a running calendar that we've kept in Google. So how many of you post around holidays or important events that aren't necessarily specific to your organization? Probably most of us. We sometimes, next week we'll probably see lots of turkeys and other Thanksgiving-related content. So we keep another Excel document that has running dates with all of those really interesting holidays. I don't know who gets to decide what day is International Wine Day or Hot Dog Day or Taco Day, but we pay attention to those and work them into our content when it makes sense. We do not include every holiday. But there's a really nice tool from Meltwater, which is free. It's called Social Sidekick. Every Thursday, it will send you an email, and it's a digest of all of those interesting days, which TV shows are launching that week, which shows are new to Netflix. So some of it's personally awesome. Some of it's really work-related. But it's a really nice free resource that you can sign up for. And we like to look at that on Thursdays and say, these days are coming up in the next few days, next week. What can we do with it? Does it make sense for the university to be involved in National Toast Day? Maybe, maybe not. Do we have National Waffle Day? Yes, we do, because we have Husker waffles in the dining halls. So we jump in on that one. But it's a really nice way to have a free resource that we can use. And we keep all of that also in another Google spreadsheet. As things are happening on campus, as things are interesting, we keep kind of a running calendar so we know what's coming up. So when we're trying to create content for our channels or for campus, we have a plan and we can work ahead. So I would love to be 2 months in ahead, but I'm always playing catch up. So congratulations that you can be that early. The rest of us who have to work kind of in those 1 to 2 weeks, we can do it and we will. So there's plenty of ways to do it. The other big piece with content planning is who's on your content team? So does anybody in the room have a team of people that help come up with content? Do you want to share kind of what their roles are, who they are within your organization? We'll start with you.
Yeah, I work at a private college in Omaha, and it's myself and 3 others, and really we just plan content we use Smartsheets. It's an online sharing resource, and Hootsuite. But we plan out all
What roles do those people play in your organization?
They kind of help. We're all in the marketing department.
Okay.
So we're all, one's a web site designer and the other's a graphic designer. And so they just help create the content, and then I kind of like take it from there.
Perfect. It works for your team. That's
Yeah.
great. For the other ones who raised their hand, are most people within marketing likely? Does anybody work with other people outside of marketing? Nobody? Ty? Well, doctors don't count. No, I'm just kidding. Doctors count. Is that multiple doctors or a doctor?
One doctor is the lead, and then he works with the other doctors, and mostly for content, because their stuff is.
Yeah. What's the benefit of having that doctor? For you, what has been a success from that?
Prior to him coming on board, it was like pulling teeth to get information from him. But with him being the champion and them seeing the success that he's had with blog posts and things that he's done on military paths and things like that, now some of them are coming, how did you do that? And then they interact with him. And he lets them know, oh, it's real simple. You can talk about this subject here, and then he keeps the information flowing to our.
I think we struggle with this in marketing. We think we have to own everything because we're control freaks. I'm a control freak, and I do own it all. But I only own the publishing. I don't come up with all the stories. I encourage you to look outside of marketing to find the stories. There are plenty of people. This is why Southwest does such a great job, because all of their stories are about their people. They're not, marketing might be writing, marketing might be publishing, but they're not the content generators necessarily. Some of those people have really great stories. Some of those people have really great skills. Just because they're not in marketing doesn't mean they can't participate in the process. And this is what I encourage, especially, how many are teams of 1 to 2? Most of you. So 1 to 2, that's a lot of work for you. But if you can find other people that will generate stories, or find other people that can help take a photo at an event that you don't have to go to. I don't like to be here till midnight every night. It makes it very difficult to sleep. So I find people that go to events and just say, you're on my team for the day, text me the photo. Take a photo, write me a tweet. I don't let them do the heavy lifting and actually posting, but they can process. I can process everything from my mobile device, from my couch, which is really beneficial. So I encourage you to empower the people around you. If your boss is already going to a meeting and you don't want to, give them the techniques or tips that they need to take care of that content for you. Then you just provide them feedback. To me, especially with social content, if it's not completely goal-driven, if it's kind of more of the fun stuff, you can win in that, and then you can correct it, and you can fix it for the next time. You're not going to lose anything. Especially because people will forgive you for not the best photo on a phone. I'm not saying you're going to use that same photo for your publication or for your website, but social content doesn't have to be as perfect, and I think it's almost better when it's not. This is why Snapchat and stories on Instagram are doing so well, because it's authentic, it's in the moment, and it's easy. How many people have a mobile device? We'll switch. How many do not have a mobile device? Exactly. All of our mobile devices are equipped to shoot a video, shoot a photo. You can do a panoramic. Anybody have the iPhone 7? You could become a photographer with the new some of those filter features. They're not real photographers. I know there are actual photographers in the room, but you can play one on TV with this. There are lots of really good options with your phone, so I encourage you to expand that team. Those people think differently. They have different perspectives. They have different experiences. They can play into creating better content. I have a hard time, especially year after year, coming up with new ways to pitch the same things. We have a lot of the same stuff on campus. It doesn't always change. The leaves are always going to, look really pretty and then fall off. How do I tell that story differently? So encouraging more people on the team to help tell that story, I think, will be a win for you. And if it doesn't work out, don't use their photo or don't use their video, and correct them.
So how do you get your internal team win that battle of convincing them that having your experts within your organization that are not in marketing, get them to provide that content and see the value in it? Because that's where we run into stuff. It's just pulling teeth.
Sure. A lot of times it's a conversation, like a very personal, hey, I know you're going to this. Can you take a few photos for me? It will help me do more, because I don't have to think about that, and I can think here. So I'm spending more of my time in this strategic thought or expanding on this idea, and you're playing that part. You're already going to be there. So I think half the battle is just asking, And then the other thing is coaching the right people. I'm not saying send out a mass email to everybody in the company and ask them to submit things. But if you've been around your organization for a while, or you have some good colleagues that you could say, hey, who's going to this or who's doing this, who has some of these skills, I think you'll be surprised that all you need is 1 to 2. You don't need this. Once you get more than that, you have a huge team that you then have to manage, and then it becomes a burden. But if you can expand your reach a little bit and encourage those people to participate, maybe you have somebody that just likes to edit. They just want to edit content. That would be awesome. Or they want to take photos. Or my big thing is asking what they want to do and then taking their strengths or their skills and incorporating them. I don't like to tell people to do things because if I tell you to take a photo and you don't like taking photos, your photo is going to be from the back of the room of all the people's heads. I'm not going to use that photo. It's not a good photo. I'd rather see your smiling faces. So I need somebody that's not afraid to jump up here and take the photo from the front. But I'm not going to tell somebody to do that. I need somebody that has that kind of in them. Our photographers and videographers are fearless. They will get in front of anybody and everybody. They're not afraid. I don't like doing that. I'm always afraid I'm going to be in somebody's way, so I'll send somebody else to go do those things. But they're okay with it. So it's incorporating them into your team and finding their strengths and seeing where they can fit. And it might work, it might not. But there might be ways to make your life a little bit easier. And that's my end-up goal. Lindsay?
I was just gonna say, I would add to that, tell the people you're trying to get the information, you want to go to whatever, tell them what benefit they're going to get out of it. So, if it's promoting their cause, their area, they're going to get more budget. People are going to see how exciting their stuff is, whatever it might be, tell them the benefit they're going to get by providing you that content.
Definitely. And sorry, I don't know your name.
Michaela.
Michaela.
We did recently partner with our admissions staff and our housing staff, and we recruited 5 students, 3 residence advisors, and 2 student ambassadors, and they were each assigned 1 day a week to post something, anything, on Instagram. And it's just 1 day a week, and it has worked out so well. Our followers more than doubled in 2 weeks, and our engagement increased by like over 400%. And just sporadically, we'll just incentivize them with like a $5 surprise thank you gift card and tell them what benefit they're contributing to the college, and it's just worked out really well.
What's been the benefit for you? What have you won from that?
I rarely touch Instagram. It's just like you said, it's like they create the content. It's that user-generated content that I'm unable, and as a marketer at the college, to create myself. Like it's just I can't get that type of reach that they can.
Yeah. So that I think it's I know some businesses can't do this and some organizations can't, but I think you just have to ask and keep pushing and keep trying. You'll be surprised how many people want to be involved, especially if you're only taking a little bit of their time. Even if you say, hey, let's meet over lunch, so we're not taking away from their work day, we're not taking away from their, what they're getting paid for to be there for however many hours they're there. It's in their own time, and then maybe it can start working in. When I started at Swanson, we didn't have a social team. Everybody kind of just met in at lunch, and we launched it for the agency. And we didn't get paid extra for it. We wanted to do it. So it was good for a while because we all wanted to, and then they switched the team, and more people got involved. So we were able to each take 10 minutes for a project versus somebody trying to take 3 hours for a project. So it works differently in different organizations, but it can't hurt to ask for more help, especially if they feel the reward or they have a kind of a stake in it. Did you have a comment?
I had a question. You said that you guys met together. Is there more of a benefit of meeting or on email? Like when you mentioned it, I was thinking, oh, maybe like once every other week or something, I could email this certain set of people and ask them if they have ideas versus meeting. But is there benefits to actual meeting?
I'm glad you asked because that's the next point. How often do you meet? So I think it works on your team. So I have a colleague that works at Michigan State, and to get more people in her dining centers to send her content, the workers, she sends out the results. Stephanie's photo got 1,000 likes this week. Where are the rest of you at? And kind of made it a competition between the staff to send her content, and they felt really empowered and important because their content made it on the official Michigan State dining Twitter, I think is what it was. So I say it works whatever your team needs to do. She sends out emails because dining managers don't have time to meet with her. Like it just doesn't work out to get everybody in the same room at the same time. They don't have lunch for free because that's their busy time. And they're spread out across campus. So she used an email. I personally use a meeting. It's 30 minutes on a Monday, and we talk. But that's because we're all there at the same time. We've also used FaceTime. We've used Google Hangouts. We've used other means to talk to people. We have so much technology in front of us, and most of it is free, that don't let that stop you. I would say, and the frequency, does anybody meet with teams? I guess you said with your team, how often do you guys meet?
Every other week.
Every other week?
Once a month.
Once a month? Once a week? So kind of going to the next idea, what tools can you use? What's free? What does your organization already have? I found out last week that one of our groups has this amazing, kind of like Google Hangouts software that I was able to use that allows me to share my screen and have a webcast all at the same time. And they're like, we have extra licenses. You can have one. Deal. And I use it, and that's an easier way to communicate because now we can actually be, in a sense, a physical meeting all digitally. They can see my screen. They can add things to it. I can add things to it. And we can have that meeting without having to travel, especially as it gets colder. I don't want to leave my office. We have people across the state. It's way easier to do that than email is great. Nothing wrong with it, but not everybody's checking it at the same exact time. I don't know how many times I've sat and sent an email and hoped to get a response as soon as I send it, which makes zero sense, but I'm looking for that answer because nobody answers their phones anymore. So I found that each team works differently. I have some clients that want email, some that want to talk face-to-face, some that want to go to lunch once a month, some I just text. So I would say don't let it stop you, and those are some of the technology examples I provide. Do you guys have tools that you use to meet with teams or collaborate with teams that you want to share? Or we haven't talked about yet? Anybody? So is email mostly? Email? A lot of ways to...
We have I work for a company industry, we have a ton of franchisees. So we actually have this SharePoint hub that we use to share all the content at that time.
Yeah. So SharePoint's a really great one. I don't know. I think that one might cost money, which isn't a bad thing, but there's lots of opportunities, especially at bigger companies. If you talk to IT groups or you ask somebody else, like, what are you using? How do you use it? I provided some examples at the bottom that are all either really low cost or free, and I can talk about most of them because I've used them all. But I think it really depends on your team. I have some teams I use one platform for, one team I use a different one for, because everybody has different preferences. Some people want to text me, and some people only want email because they want to be able to disconnect. So I use a lot of different technology, mostly free, that I can connect with people really quickly and get what I need out of them, or at least ask them questions. So I would encourage you to look for some of this technology. If your department needs it or you need it personally, all of my teams use different things, and we make it work. Sometimes it gets a little jumbled, but...
We have access to SharePoint. We choose to use Asana.
yeah.
I think it's way better.
I think I don't know how SharePoint works on a mobile phone.
It's terrible.
Is that any better right now? I think it used to be terrible.
I like Asana more personally, but it's not franchise friendly, so it doesn't work for our business.
Yeah. And that's right. These are all examples, and I think there's different ways to do them. Like, I know people in my office that I chat with through one tool, and then other people in my office I chat with them on a different tool because it's all preferenced. I would love if they all would do one, but it's the real world, and I can't make them do anything. So I just work within those constraints. Yes?
I use Asana a lot, and I also have a couple of organizations I'm in that use Slack. But I feel like the Slack is slacking. Like, it's not more like, have you found ways to make it successful?
I've told people I would not answer them unless they put it in Slack. Because I have one client that I work personally. We moved to Slack because we expanded the team, and none of us work in the building. We all work freelance and all over the state. So we use Slack, and I told them I'm not answering your emails anymore. So when things didn't happen, I sent you an email. It wasn't in Slack. I couldn't track it. I'm sorry. So we've kind of had our troubles. We've had our roadblocks. We've had our fumbles. But we've finally figured out how to get everybody into one tool. And the idea with that is not to be heavy-handed and say this is what we have to do, but we have to commit to something. And for that big of a group that never really physically can meet, we need to be able to track it because email was getting just out of hand where people would respond, and then an hour later there'd be a response, and they'd come in at the same time, and nobody knew where anything was. And the headache was just, I couldn't take enough aspirin. So I moved to a new tool that was free. One person recommended it. We tried it, and we're sticking with it for at least the next few months to try it out. That's one thing I think with tools is we get really excited for like 2 weeks and then decide to fall back on email or another tool. Not a bad thing, but there's also ways to commit to something and really test it and try it and decide if it's going to work or not. So far, our team of like 6 of us have figured it out. We still have some roadblocks, but ultimately that's where everything lives, and that's how we kind of do. The nice thing with that is it gives you notification on your phone, as do many of these other apps. So I always know when something's being added. Just like a text message, I get an alert. Yes, ma'am?
So we use Slack as well. So how many channels do you have on Slack?
Too many. Because people have decided that adding channels was easy, so we're going to add channels. So that's part of our growing pains. We've had to realize that there are kind of rules around creating channels, and not to create a channel around everything, because then they're not all separate. A lot of them have holistic themes, so we work through those themes and then make sure it's in those, or we'll move things and delete them. So we have one person that's kind of in charge of the management of our channel and kind of reminds people of the rules and not regulations, they're not official, but kind of directing people like, hey, that needs to go here, or we're not going to be able to do it. And so far that's worked for us, but I know that there's tons of pain points for lots of people, and I don't think there's ever one answer that will fix it. Email works, but I think I get too clogged down and can't see everything. So before we get into content creation, do you guys want a break? Do people need a break for 5 minutes? Yes, we'll give a 5-minute break. So it's 1:03. So 1:08. We'll come back. We'll take 5 minutes because this is where we get really fun. Yeah.
I'm the new Stacy
Yeah.
here. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, and we can talk about this later, but just to, if you think about it in the middle of your talk, just that right now, because there's that hiring freeze, I'm now the whole marketing and comm department for the College of Journalism and Mass Comm. And if you had suggestions for us, like we recently took on Yacht to help with some of our content.
I mean, between the visual, right?
Alrighty. Now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of content creation. So this is where I spend a lot of my time coming up with ideas, funneling ideas from other people, working with my team. So with content creation, I put things in different categories. So we're going to talk about each category by itself and kind of go through them. So prescribed content, campaign or one-off content, social engagement and listening, library content, and then types of content. So really simply, for my prescribed content, content that we know we need every single week. So on my Monday meetings with my interns, they know kind of what we need. They know exactly what is our content that works really well on Monday. So we always have an Instagram collage. So I have one intern that always works at gathering user-generated content, and she creates and publishes the collage. I have others that always work on specific stories for Snapchat, or they're thinking through different polls for Twitter. We know what kind of content has been working in the previous weeks. We always look at our data, and then we decide if we're going to continue it or if we're going to discontinue it. And we make sure that everything that's already prescribed is done off the plate so that we can have more time to spend on other things. This makes planning really easy. So on our light weeks, like next week with Thanksgiving, there's not a lot happening on campus, but we still know what we need each day of the week. This makes planning, if you are planning a month out, 2 months out, way easier because you know what your content themes are, you know what your ideas are. Holidays aren't going to move on you. You know how to plan ahead for that stuff. And it allows you to focus on engagement and listening. So my goal of having this type of content planned out ahead of time is I'm not needing to do it real time. I can kind of plan it, schedule it, and let it publish. But I can spend more time listening to what my community is saying and engage with them, interact with them, ask them questions, look for other content, so that I have all my official content. If I was to be gone a whole week, it would all still be there. But how can I start layering in other more kind of personal content throughout the week? And I know this isn't possible for all organizations. I know it's harder with agencies because you might not have direct access to post. But this is how I can split my time. I spend about 70% of my time just engaging with people. The other amount of time is really planning it. I have to spend a lot of time online just listening and looking and trying to build one-on-one relationships with prospective students and alumni and faculty. This also allows you to leverage more people on your team. I'm able to say, hey, intern, you have 1 hour this week, so you're going to work on these 3 things or these 2 things. Or, hey, colleague, I need this one thing from you every week, which means I only need 20 minutes of your time every week, so I'm not taking away from all of your other assignments or projects. We probably all have a little bit of downtime between things. But I can give them one assignment, and that's one less thing I have to worry about personally. And it makes my week a lot easier, especially if I ever want to go on vacation, which I do. And I don't want to be at work sometimes, just because to take a break. But I know all the content's still going to be created, and I know it's all going to be shared at the right time, and we're going to keep our baseline really strong. So I encourage you to kind of think through this. This is where I think content themes are really, really helpful. If you think through, Monday we're going to have this, or Tuesday is Tuesday is a takeover, or Thursday is a throwback. We have different themes for each of our channels and what we're going to need for each day, and we try to hit those goals and plan that all out each week. So each of us have a very small role, but together we can accomplish it all. So this is where I think the leveraging of people and thinking through themes, especially if coming up with original content is difficult, if your organization isn't churning out a whole bunch of new content, maybe there's ways to develop a theme. Again, try it for a month, see if it works, and try it. Put it out there. See what kind of engagement can it accomplish the goals that you're looking for, and then decide from that test if you want to try something new. At the end of this, with the analysis area, I have a few tests that I'll show you that we've been working on to attempt to try to figure out the algorithms and also just understanding our audience better. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to develop these themes to take the workload off yourself so you're not stressed or busy, but can really focus on engagement, because that's where I think the core of social media is. It's not just talking at people, it's talking with those people. So if you're not just thinking about what I have to post today, you can think about how I can look for more content to engage with, or look for more people to bring into the brand conversation. So pro tip, get more people on your team involved most of the time to make the most of all of your time. Like I said, I have some interns that have 20 hours with me. I have some that have 5. So depending on when they're in the office each day, where they work from, if they work from in the office or if they're at home, I can give them those roles. So some of our social content also rolls out into our website or into some of our digital signage. So I can assign different tasks to each of them based on how much time they have, and I don't have to do that work. It's not that I don't want to do it or I don't know how to do it, but it's I can spend my time on other things because I know it's being taken care of. And I use the interns as an example because that's what I have, but I think there's other people in your offices that you could leverage for some of this content as well. It doesn't mean I have to publish everything. It doesn't mean I have to find those photos. Somebody else can find them, send them to me for approvals. It really depends on how comfortable you are with your employees or your colleagues. There are a few of our social channels that I will give the password to people to use, and they can take it over or use it themselves. There are others where the content has to flow through me first for the kind of checks and balances before it goes out. Each channel is a little bit different, but I think it's developing a relationship with your team, training them, and making sure they can do what they need to do. A lot of people get really nervous when I say students have access to these accounts, but I don't. I don't have any anxiety about giving them access. I know that that's probably a little risky. It's a risk I'm willing to take because I train them and I trust them. And in essence, they aren't going to do something that's going to lose my trust. We have a relationship. I don't just give the credentials to anybody. I want to make sure that I can trust them. I also have a really quick switch to pull it out if something goes wrong. But right now, that relationship that I have with each of those people who have access to our accounts, I think is strong enough that we aren't going to have any issues. We are protective. We do have measures in if something was to go wrong. But to me, students are my colleagues in a few years or months, and I want to trust them with that access, and I want to train them so that they can work next to me, not just as my employee. They can be my peer. So if you're looking for other people, trust them, train them, and they can be your best advocates and take a lot of work off yourself. Like I said, how many of you are one-people shops? A lot of you. Can't do it all ourselves or you're not going to last. I'm learning this slowly, but I can't do it all myself. I have to trust more people.
Tyler, can you just talk a little bit more about training? How long, how often, training other individuals to add to your team?
Sure. So training to me is, I know that word, I wish there was a different word, because training to me makes it sound like you have to sit down and you have to have long conversations and there's worksheets and quizzes and there's things. To me, training is a conversation. Have a conversation with them. Understand their level of how comfortable are they with the platform, how comfortable are they with the technology, do they understand the goal of what you're trying to do, are they asking you questions so that you can give them the answers that they need to be successful. Most of my interns in a sense have training, but it's on the job. I show them how to do something, explain it to them. We try it together a few times. Sometimes they'll send me content to review before it can go out, but after 1 or 2 weeks, they're usually on their own. They always have my guidance, they always have my ear. They can always get a hold of me to help, but I don't have to go over their shoulder every day and trust what they're going to share. I encourage them to ask lots of questions, or if they have areas that they aren't completely sure, they know they can always ask or they can always follow up. But ultimately, they help run some of my clients, and I don't even look at it because I have that trust, because I've trained them. So to me, training isn't, that's not a prescription. That's not a have to do X, Y, and Z. It's finding out where they fit, where they fall in the spectrum, and then working with them. I have some interns that are students that don't use Snapchat, so they don't work in Snapchat. They work on a different platform. Or some that are not good writers. Well, they don't write, so I don't let them. They also don't want to. So I make sure that my skill sets of what I need and what I have match. Because I think writing is the most important skill to have, but if you're not a good writer, I have a graduate assistant right now who will admit he's not the best writer, which is crazy because he's going for a PhD and he's going to have to write a lot, but he loves data. He loves analytics. He loves looking at numbers. So what does he do every week? He does my analytics. He looks at my numbers. He tells me where we fall. He is the strength to my weakness because I'm not very analytical. I understand how to read data, but he helps me get through all of that because he will go through, on Snapchat, you have to screenshot things and then add in the data manually. He does that every single day. It's something I could do but don't want to do. He's good at it. So that training was not a training. It was, how do we do it? Please do it, and then let's talk about it. So I encourage people, don't let training stop you from working with other people, and provide feedback. Sometimes they'll do things and I'll be like, well, maybe we should have said it this way, or maybe we should have used this filter, or try to take that photo from this angle. But I've never had to delete anything from poor content that's been published. We try to make sure that we're all using the same aesthetic or the same brand, the same voice. I do have training documents, so there are some documents for my clients that transfer from intern to intern. So it's reading material to make sure that they understand what happens, so there's no lapse when I have one intern replace another. I step in the middle ground, and then they pick it right up. So there are those documents that move on, but I don't think training has to be super complicated. I do not have really long contracts or guidelines. I know there are some people that have to. I get to control how I do it. I know there are some industries that are heavily regulated, and this is probably making them really nervous right now. That's okay. Figure out what works for your team. I know there are plenty of industries that can't do what I can do, but I think there's parts and pieces that you could use and leverage to make it work for your team. Yes? So campaign or one-off content. Content that has a specific purpose or is irregular. So like next week, Thanksgiving to me is one of those one-offs. So we've actually thought through some other fun content. So we'll have a little bit of a campaign next week for Instagram. But this is the type of stuff where I would rather spend more time on it because my other stuff can be planned and done up front. I don't have to think as much about this. I can have more fun thinking about the campaigns or the one-offs because I think they have a lot of value, and this is where we can balance our team. So if everybody knows what they need to do in a week and it's kind of, a well-oiled machine, they get that done. Then with their extra time, we think through kind of this one-off content or campaign type things. It doesn't allow us to inject more goal-focused content. So next week we have a diversity analysis on Monday. That's not something that we knew about 3 months ago. That's not something we knew about months ago. It's a few weeks that we've known about it. So now we can work that content around that one event and start creating it and sharing it. So this is why I personally do not plan everything out months and months in advance because I have to be more in the moment and what's going on campus. But we have the resources and the time to help promote that event and help people understand how they can get there, what are the details, because we're spending time doing that versus having to create kind of all that prescribed content that's already done and ready. It can usually be really, can have a unique look or feel. This is where I think people can have a little bit more fun. We did some fun things for Halloween. We dressed up Herbie in Little Red in a bunch of costumes. That's not normal. That's not specific to the brand. But it allows us to do kind of fun things one-off because they're more campaign-type things than kind of the consistent stuff that we would do all the time. We don't do this a ton because we do have to kind of follow brand standards. But I think it's sometimes fun to interject something different that people aren't going to expect because you might catch their attention, especially on things that don't happen all the time. I use the diversity analysis as an example because we don't do that all the time. And I need to catch people's attention and make them realize that this is something that's different and isn't just happening every month or every year. It's a very specific event that we encourage people to participate in. We do require more work and more planning with these ones because we've kind of scheduled for it. So like our Thanksgiving one, we're doing this food fight, so you'll start seeing it on Monday. If you're not following us on Instagram, you and Lincoln, please do. It'll be fun. We're doing a food fight. So we have a bunch of different pairings from Thanksgiving that we're going to encourage people to vote on and cast their vote to be part of this food fight and enter to win prizes by voting on if they prefer potato versus sweet potato. So we had a lot of fun with, what was it, sweet potato? Okay, well you vote next week and you can be entered to win bigger prizes. But we know next week's going to kind of have a lull. It's going to be a little bit quieter on campus. People are a little bit more focused on getting out of campus for a few days and enjoying the holiday. So we've spent more time and resources on kind of creating fun campaign stuff. We don't get to do this often, but we've had the ability to do it because we planned for it. And I was able to steal 30 minutes in between reviews with some of our design team or 20 minutes here with some of our videographers and just kind of fit it in between reviews and projects. So I encourage you that as you have these things, for us, the goal of that is to have high engagement. It's not going, we're not going to get more applications to enroll. We're not going to recruit more faculty. We're not going to show off all our research with this. It's just to have a little fun around Thanksgiving and have high engagement. What we've found is with high engagement includes more followers. So if we have great content that people are engaging with, more people see it in the algorithm of Instagram, so we can gain more followers. So that when we have stories about faculty's research, or when we are recruiting positions, or trying to recruit students, we have the audience that we need. So sometimes it's okay to have a little fun and be a little bit off-brand in a sense, just to really hit the goals of getting more people to be involved in the project. Pro tip, Plan those monthly or quarterly to cut down on quick turnaround times. So we were thinking about Halloween for those Husker graphics. We thought about that in August. We've been thinking about Thanksgiving since September. So I encourage you to look at your calendar and figure out what makes sense. Are there ways to inject thematic things that are relevant to your organization, are happening in the nation, happening in the community? How can you be involved with some of this campaign type stuff? Because then you can have a little bit more fun. I think this fun also gets your team a little bit more excited. My team loves the work they do every day. They love working for the university, but the food fight has been a way to kind of get away from the desk and try something brand new. And our bosses were okay with that because it's not taking too much time away from their normal day, but it's kind of reinvigorating them. It's getting them excited about being at work. So in a sense, I'm keeping our talent here, I like to think. But we're just giving something a little bit different than the normal, what are the messages we have to deliver today or that we deliver kind of every week, just repackaged. Any questions? All right, so social engagement and listening. So are you listening to what your audience is saying about you online? How many people could say yes? Raise your hand. If you're listening to what your audience is saying about you online. Raise your hand up just so I can see. Sorry, we're in a slope. So 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. Were those both up? You guys are up. Yeah, 10, 11. So 11. How many of you are not? The rest? So the rest aren't listening. Why not? Do you not know how? Do you not know what that means, what it does, how it works? Yes, ma'am.
I would say that I listen to my audience, but I don't feel like they're saying that much. And maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's something that...
Do you want to share where you work so we can...
Yeah, I work at the University of Living.
Okay.
We do get a lot of live features, but not a lot of saying much. I'd like more.
Sure.
Or maybe I'm missing. Maybe I should be listening to something else.
Yeah. How do you listen to them?
I'm just saying like I look at their comments or I look at the engagement that they're having.
Sure. So the idea of social listening is kind of expanding past that, and I would say this is still new, and people are still trying to figure it out. But setting up search queries in free tools, like Twitter or TweetDeck, or Hootsuite does this as well, but are there certain hashtags that people are participating with? Are you encouraging them to? So community blood bank, as you get your, you make your donation, you get your t-shirt and your orange juice. Is there a selfie station that they take a photo and share it? Are they using a hashtag? I'm not saying that this needs to happen, but those are ways that you can encourage. Hashtags are the most simple way to listen, but there's also just keyword searches. Are people saying community plus blood bank and Lincoln? Or are they saying blood bank? Is that information that you should be listening to see what people are saying? Most of the conversations happening about our brands, they're not tagging us in them. They're not necessarily using our hashtags, but they're sharing content out there just with keywords and phrases. I use a little bit more of an advanced tool just because I got lucky and got money this year to do that. But there's a lot of free tools out there that you can be listening. How many of you have Instagram accounts for your organization? How many people are looking at the locations when people tag locations? Some of you. So what I found this year on Instagram is I can promote the UNL hashtag as much as I would like till every event I go to, I say use it. Some people do, some people don't, but a ton of people tag the university in the location field. So they're not adding the UNL in the comment, but they're using the location field to say where they're at. So for me, that's an opportunity to review those location fields and say, oh, that's who posted. So as your community blood bank travels, because I know you guys have traveling, is that the same organization? You travel? Yeah, so as you're at a different event for the day, on Instagram, look at the location. Don't necessarily look at the comments. Look and see who's tagging what where. What we found is location has allowed us to have more engagement with people that don't, it's kind of Big Brother-ish, but we can add comments. Some of them are still using the hashtag, which is great, but we can go and comment on them and ask them questions or engage with them, have this one-on-one relationship based on those locations. Some tools like Hootsuite, you can either add the app or if you have an account that allows you to, but there's apps in there that you can actually set up a radius for a certain location. So for us, tagging the university is great, but there's also this building here. There's the Union. There's other buildings. There's plenty of locations on campus. So we use an app within the tool that sets up a radius, allows us to add this circle around campus. So any content shared within that circle and tagged to a location that falls within said circle, we can see it. And then we can make the judgment if we're going to interact with it. Some of that's on the fringe of like downtown Lincoln, so we don't always need to interact with it. But a lot of it is in our area of central of campus, or we set one up on East Campus as well. And these are ways that we can find content to repurpose on our own accounts, so user-generated content. And there's also a way for us just to interact with users. Oftentimes we get a ton of visitors on campus. They don't know what hashtag to use. Their parents don't know what hashtag to use. So that's an opportunity for us to say, congratulations on coming to campus today, or making the big choice of being a Husker. Enjoy the event, enjoy the game. These are our little touches where I spend most of my time just trying to build a one-on-one relationship with each of these people. So there are a lot of free tools to have that listening. There's some more expensive and paid tools. Students, I'll tweet it out later, but there's also a free tool if you have a student account. I just learned about it at a conference that has an advanced listening tool, and it allows you to use it for free as a student. So those who are not, ask your interns to help you set it up and use it. But it allows you to set up Boolean queries, which is something within a certain location or certain keywords and phrases that you can be searching for that your users might be using. And then it could be queries just around the brand, around common things about admissions, or things that they're saying about, they're mad about your brand. So brand name plus angry, pissed, other words of negative sentiment, and it will show up in the stream. So there's lots of tools for kind of this social listening, and we aren't always being tagged in posts. So we have to be willing to listen to what people are saying about us so that we can build those relationships or solve the problems if somebody's mad. The constant themes on campus people are mad about. Parking, I can't fix it. One-ply toilet paper, can't fix that either. And just little things like that. But if you're upset because the desk is broken in a classroom, I can fix that because I can call facilities and ask them to come fix it. If the room's too hot, the room's too cold, if you can't find something or if you're upset, I can listen to anything people are saying and hopefully fix that problem so that they don't have a negative experience with their brand. So if you have a location, that's great. If you have some keywords and phrases, that's where I encourage you to start. And do a little bit of Googling on social listening, because I think this is something that we're all going to be required to do going forward, because we're not always going to see things that are tagged with our brand names or with certain hashtags. Yes, ma'am.
What tools are these called that you are using as far as
So I have Hootsuite Enterprise, so I have a paid account I'm using for advanced listening, but I can tweet out a link because there's a whole bunch of them. I went to a session in Boston a few weeks ago, and there's a whole bunch of free ones and a whole bunch of ones that are low cost and then some ones that are of a higher cost. The example that she presented was she works for a loan servicing company, and a few years ago when the government shut down, somebody set up a fake Twitter account in their name and said, all loans are forgiven, they're free, the government shut down. She was able to hear that as it was being said online. She wasn't tagged in it but could see it in her alerts, and then was able to get it shut down in 24 hours. Her competitors were not, and they were in the news for Sally Mae says this, and it took them like 2 or 3 weeks to get shut down. So because of this social listening, she's able to engage with people that are talking about her brand, good and bad, and also solve problems and answer questions and get rid of things that are false. So for her direct quote is, my boss said it's worth all the money this year because they solved that problem and weren't in the national news for something negative. So I know that changes based on budgets. I just got a budget this year. I begged, borrowed, and stealed. That's my budget. And hopefully it stays through. But there are a lot of free tools. I've never spent money on a tool until August. I've gotten away with a lot of free tools. Lots of tabs open in my internet browsers. But I think there's ways to get through that, and we'll talk through some of those in just a few minutes. Any other questions on this one?
I just have one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
So we had a hashtag campaign last year, and you can only see the public post.
Correct.
So when we're trying to give something away, people didn't understand that they had to make the post public for us to see their hashtag.
Which platforms are you running it on as well?
Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Twitter was a little bit easier, but
Yeah.
Facebook.
So I would encourage, unless somebody else knows a way around it, Facebook privacy settings makes it very difficult to see anything that's got a hashtag. So I don't even encourage it there. If you want to have a third option, I would encourage email, because everybody can email from their device, but you have to add that context in there of it does have to be a public account or we can't see it. So I have a client that a lot of their posts are all private, and they're like, why don't you post that? Well, I can't see it. So you have to, it's a little bit of education for the audience to help them realize, like, if they want us to be involved with them, if they want to participate in our contest, they have to have a public account or email us. And that's where you can set up like a vanity email that maybe goes to just for contests where it's not going to your inbox, so you don't have to worry about finding them. I have a vanity one for the university, so all my contest stuff goes there. My normal work day is in a different box, but it's still all in one inbox in Outlook. But it's separate folders. That allows us to encourage interaction based on platform, but we aren't going to win, especially depending on your demographics. If they're only on Facebook, email is probably going to be their only option if they're not on Twitter or Instagram. The other thing is I really encourage you to, as a side note, double check your hashtags before you promote them. I was working with somebody yesterday, and they had a really positive hashtag, but as soon as I added it to my feed, it was not suitable for work. And I felt really uncomfortable because it was all nudity. And it was really, I was like, I hope IT is not watching right now because this is not what I meant it to be. So do a little bit of searching before you promote a hashtag, especially if you're working with students or younger audiences. One, for you don't want things to go out there that are not appropriate, but also you don't want a lot of noise. So if you can cut down on the other posts that are being made by adding numbers or adding acronyms, that is a better chance of finding content that you're looking for versus seeing a lot of content from other things that you have to kind of wade through. Does that make sense to everybody? Is that clear? No? So if you were to do like hashtag UNL, so for us, for the university, there is also an organization called Usher's New Look, Usher like the singer. So I try to exclude content that mentions Usher. But Usher's New Look, there's a school in South America that's university something something and also uses UNL. So I have to wade through that content, and to me that's really noisy. So it's not all stuff coming from this campus, it's coming from all these other people. So when I interact with content, I have to double check it's my students or the campus and not other groups. If you're having an event and you promote a hashtag 1234 exclamation point, if there's a whole bunch of other people posting about it, you probably want a new hashtag or something different so that those people who are using it are only using it for your event or your organization. You can't block people from using it. There's not a way to exclude anybody, but the more creative or specific that you can get, the better chance you have of finding content that's just relevant to you. I would encourage you to go into Twitter and Instagram is kind of where I do all my checks. So log into the platforms, use the search tool, and just see what's already being searched, or is already being used, excuse me. And that way you can kind of make things a little bit different. A little noise is okay, but if it's really noisy, you can always make that choice, but then it makes your life a little bit more difficult if you're trying to find content to interact with.
How do you get around GBR with Great Britain?
I don't look at it. I have it sometimes, but Great Britain, Great Barrier Reef, I don't promote that hashtag and don't use it very often because it's really, really noisy for things that aren't related to football. I'm lucky that I'm not football, so I don't have to worry about as much building an audience with fans of Husker football or Husker athletics in general. But it is weird when you have the Olympics or any other big sporting event and it does go to Great Britain. I don't find it helpful. I followed it for a long time, but I would see like, oh, look at that that's Great Barrier Reef. Like, it's not anything to do with Nebraska. So that's where it's like, I don't know how you get away from it because we can't completely change Husker Nation and tell them not to yell, go Big Red and GBR. We can't make that change. But I've not put my eggs in that basket at all of promoting it. I'll use it supplementary sometimes, but really I focus on the UNL or Husker Power or some other ones that I know are a little bit more specific to what I need to interact with versus lots of noise. There are really great pictures of the Great Barrier Reef, though, if you want to search that. My last point with this one is, again, pending your industry, and you're allowed to do this, but really leveraging user-generated content. I'll show you at the end with some of our analysis on tests that we've been doing. But user-generated content works really, really well. It's content that you didn't have to create. It's content you have to find, so that's not, there's not time involved. But you can have a perspective that maybe you didn't shoot. In a sense, user-generated content is another person on my team. So every Monday, like I mentioned earlier, we have an Instagram collage that just features user-generated content. So we find between 6 and 9 photos from campus that people have shared. We put them in a collage and post it on Instagram and tag them in it. They feel Insta-famous for the day. It's really good content that doesn't require me to do much more than search for a few minutes. It's one of our prescribed pieces of content that goes out every Monday. And it's a really easy way to build relationships. It usually gets high engagement because we've added 6 or 9 people from campus in the post. So they tell their friends tell them. And we try to make this kind of relationship around this one piece of content. We also leverage user-generated content on our university homepage. So if you scroll down just slightly, there's a whole bunch of content. We always link back to the original piece of content and cite the source. So we never try to own that content. It's not ours. It's just kind of presenting it. It's only public content. So again, we can't find content that's private. So in most cases, people get nervous, like, oh, you took somebody's photo. I'm not taking, I'm borrowing, and I'm crediting. And if they don't want it, we'll take it down. I've never had anybody ask that. I know there are some industries that cannot do this. My example from financial services and loan processing, her people said, no, you can't do that. So double check with your team before you start doing this, because I don't want anybody to get in trouble. But if you have a chance to leverage user-generated content, it does make your life much easier. Oftentimes for football games, some of the best photos that I can share are photos from fans in the stands. And I can't be everywhere. Even if I had a great seat, it would all the photos would come from my perspective or my angle. The amount of great content you can get from an event, or you can get from really anything by just following hashtags or seeing what people are posting on a location, especially on Instagram, it's really rich. And you can add that to your weekly content. Maybe every Friday you're super busy, you have meetings all day, or you're just tired like I am. That's a user-generated content day. Spend a few minutes to find it, post it. And for us, we've seen really, really good engagement, lots of comments, and it's wins for that day. It builds a relationship with that individual student or prospective student or family member, and it is a great piece of content that encourages more people to follow us and engage with our brand. So if you can leverage user-generated content, please look for ways to do that, because I think you'll win with it, and I don't think that's going away. Even as platforms disappear or new platforms come, it's just new ways to package it, and users really appreciate it. We're actually building our admissions group is building a poster right now, so they're actually taking user-generated content offline into a piece, a poster. So I think that will be cool. There's plenty of ways that you can use it, not just socially, but as long as you get permission from the author, I think there's ways that you can leverage it. And again, you're not having to create it, or it's not from your perspective. It's a unique piece of content that can be shared. So the poster we are. So the poster we're asking for permission from everybody that we use. So my rule of thumb, and I would never print anything and then use for marketing without permission of the author. So if they say no, we'll move on to the next one. If they say yes, I'm not on that project per se. I know about it. So I don't know how they're crediting them, or if it will be a list, or maybe they won't be, but we've gotten their permission from the user. I would never want to take people's photos and not let them know I'm borrowing it. So on social, what I usually do is I really don't like the repost giant thing on top of the photo, because I think sometimes it ruins it. So I always, sometimes I use it if it doesn't disturb the coolness of the photo. There's apps that do that for free. But I usually credit them in the comments and tag them in it. We always try to let them know, because not only do I want to have a great photo that people will interact with, I want to build a relationship with that person. Because maybe then when they take another photo, they'll tag me in it, or they'll use the UNL hashtag, or they'll continue to create great content. There's this few student photographers on campus, they tag us in everything, and I wish I could use their photos every day because they're great. I try not to use the same author over and over. But so far we've gotten away with that in the sense that we kind of have a permission with them. I've never had anybody tell me, can you please take it down? I would if they asked. I have no problem with that. But to me, social media, you're being a little bit social. If you don't want to be social, I can't find it anyways. So the only area that we stay away from, and mostly just because we haven't had opportunity for it, is like small kids or children. Like, I don't want to take somebody's photo of a small child unless it's my own and post that. So those we would ask permission before we would repost those. We don't post a lot of pictures of small children, so we don't really have that issue. But if you are an organization that works with minors, I would encourage you to figure out if there's a policy or make a policy and get permissions that way, because that could I feel like that could maybe get in some legal trouble or get people to say they don't want it posted. Again, we're only pulling public information. We're never looking for things that are private. But it never hurts to ask. All they have to do is say no, and then you just move on to a new piece of content. So my pro tip, it can be used beyond social. It adds authenticity and builds a relationship with your audience. I think that I strongly encourage, if you can leverage it, do. It makes your life a lot easier, and it builds a relationship with somebody, which I think is the goal of all of us, is to build a one-on-one relationship with our consumer or user. All right. Any questions? Okay. We're going to keep going. So social engagement and listening. So tag inbound content to identify themes for new types of content to produce. So as we start seeing themes about toilet paper, that's my small joke, but we do. Or if we start seeing lots of people posting about a certain topic, we start to tag it or note it. So maybe it's a piece of content that we need to be creating. If a bunch of people are complaining about parking, that there isn't any, do we need to remind them that they can buy parking passes or that there's a free shuttle? Or how can we solve a problem? So we try to tag content that's coming inbound if we start to see themes. I have an example from this from actually an AMA thing I went to a few years ago with the lady from Nissan. They tag incoming kind of complaints, and they were able to find out that one of their cars was defective and work with an engineer to fix it. The way they found out about it is enough people from across the country had complained about their sunroof having a weird smell. Well, it wasn't in one area. There wasn't a lot of consistency besides the weird smell and the same kind of car. So they were able to look at that, talk to the engineers, get back to the people that had posted about it, and figure out that actually it was molding and causing issues with the way the car was designed. So nobody was complaining about that they're not writing in a form, my car smells like eggs. They're not calling Nissan and saying my car smells like eggs. They're complaining online. So Nissan is listening, and Nissan was able to tag that type of content and then identify themes. So maybe there's really positive themes. We have leadership symposiums happening on campus right now where lots of high school students are coming. We had a conference yesterday with 1,700 students for Math Day. So I tag those positive things and kind of say, this is what our social impact around these events. This is why we have these events. Students like them. Look at the reach. Look at how many people are posting about it. They're all, in a sense, creating positive relationship for the university because they're talking about us online. So I can tag those posts and then print out a report if I would like. I have that built into the tool I use. Before, I used a pen and paper, or I took a screenshot or saved links. There are ways around it if you don't have a sophisticated tool. I don't get a ton of content, so I'm imagining most of us are probably on the same playing field where have a running document. You see something that starts to pop up more than once, just pop in the link, the direct link to the tweet or the Facebook post or the Instagram post. And then at the end of the week or at a certain amount of time, decide, is there enough? Did it actually come up to be something? Did it not? You don't waste any time, really. You're just kind of keeping track. It's really nice for us because I had a person from admissions email me yesterday or text me and was like, what was the chatter online? Were people excited to be here? For her, that's the feedback that she's not going to get in surveys. She's not necessarily going to get from them up front, but she can tell based on volume of content and what they were saying online, was it good or was it bad? Because she had a feeling that some of it might have not been as great. Well, I didn't see any of that around the searches that I had, around the locations I'm looking at, around the hashtags that they're using. So I was able to give kind of her a peace of mind in the feeling that I think she had a great conference because all the content, at least online, said she did. We didn't see anything that said otherwise. So maybe people are really mad. They didn't publicly post about it. My disclaimer is there isn't a tool to listen to Snapchat. There's not a tool to listen to GroupMe or some of those texting pieces. Those are all really personal, and there's not a way into those right now. So if somebody is happy or sad or anything else, and they're posting on those platforms, we aren't going to know about it unless they send it to us directly. So we are blind in some areas on social. Part of that is the tools don't open up APIs or allow us to get into them from the outside. So we have to kind of just be blind in those areas until we are allowed to have, a little bit of sight on them and they let us in. All right, library content. I have the most fun with this. I think this is where you can really leverage downtime. This is where you can leverage other people. This is where you can steal ideas, borrow ideas. But what events or happenings and things do you have every year? Does any of you have an event they have every year? Most people? Does anybody have, we all celebrate very similar holidays. We all have the same type of announcements. We all know that 4th of July is coming. So do you participate in those areas, those themes? If so, you can create that content anytime. So we don't have to be in a time struggle. We don't have to be in the point where 4th of July is tomorrow and we have nothing. You can create 4th of July things in January. You can create them in October if you'd like. You can create them at any time. The reason I use 4th of July is this is my entry point into creating library content for campus. I was tired of seeing pixelated flags coming from university accounts. One, they were taken from Google, which is not ever good. And two, they weren't even stealing good photos. They were stealing bad photos. So I encourage you, if there's a chance for library content, I'm going to use Complete Nutrition as an example, probably because franchises can share similar content for holidays, and there's probably parts of that. You can create a Black Friday graphic anytime. You know when Black Friday is going to be. We don't have to wait until the month of, the day of, the week of. We can create things way in advance if we think about it and if we work on it. So I'm trying to be better at planning things way in advance. I will outwardly admit I'm not the best at it. But there are ways to create this kind of content and have it just ready. If there's some downtime, if you have designers that are looking for things to do, if you have downtime or you want to plan ahead or work ahead, library content I encourage to focus on and think about how far in advance you can do it. Your event gets over, take a deep breath, reflect on it, create the graphics for the next year. What worked, what didn't work, what can you change? To me, library content is one of those areas that we should focus on it, we should use it, but it shouldn't take up all our time the week of something that's big that's happening. We can really kind of throw it in a library, or you can throw it in a folder, a Dropbox or a box, and just have it ready. At the university, we create this kind of content and make it available for university partners. They can go in and download it for Facebook, or they can download it for their digital signage. We control the styling, but we can also give them way more options. Mother's Day, I think we had 14 different options for people to post about because I had a designer that had a ton of time open and she wanted to do it. So for me, it won because we had great content for campus, and I gave my designer something meaningful to work on that was kind of outside of her norm. Again, for those who only have one team, one-member teams, think through the content that you could use library-wise, and when you have an open time, fit it in. Or think about what makes the most sense. I think you can win with libraries, and I'm a big advocate of them. Yes?
Is there any places or sites or anything that you could go to for inspiration for things like that? Because like on Veterans Day, I literally spent forever trying to think of something that was more creative than just a picture of a flag, and I was lacking.
Yeah, for me, I don't design as much because that's not my role, but I know our designers go on Pinterest and they search those things. They go on Google. They go on Canva or other kind of design websites. And even if it's not for Veterans Day, they see something that's like, ooh, I can make that work for Veterans Day, or I can make that work for a holiday or for an event. Behance is a really popular kind of design site for people, for professional designers, so it encourages really good work to inspire to be. There are a lot of really free tools. I encourage Googling. I think that helps. Pinterest is one of the areas too because a lot of that stuff is tagged really well. There's also sometimes a lot of noise, so it's hard to find great Mother's Day graphics when you're going through all this other Mother's Day stuff. But there's plenty. Anybody else have ideas on where you go for inspiration?
I just have a question actually. Like, how much do you use designers and how much do you plan on taking like your own photos? Because for us, Instagram, we're trying to make it more UGC-like, not necessarily always be posting things with our ambassadors. So like for me, I was on a road trip and I told my dad, I was like, stop. When you see a flag, go and take a picture of Veterans Day. Like, how often would you say you do that? Or you see people doing that?
A little bit of everything. I think it really depends on your brand. So some of our stuff, when I'm planned out and have library content, I use more perfected stuff. But I spent the last 3.5 years jumping out of cars and windows and trying to take those photos. There's a really great flag on the corner of 84th and Cornhusker at that gas station. It's been used a few times. Same one as O Street right over the bridge. There's a giant flag, a Husker one. I would say don't stop doing that. Keep looking for those inspiration. What we try to do with library content is give a lot of those variations. So we have things that look polished, things that don't look as nice. We don't want this content to replace authenticity. We want it just to be available for those people who can't design or don't have time to design or don't want to design. We don't mandate anything. It's just available. It's a library piece that you can try. I try to always use one of our photos from our photographers, or I go take a photo, because I think especially for Instagram it's more authentic. But last few years we've had really cool video. So I borrowed video from our team that has shot it for something else, and we've repurposed it. So for them it's a win because they shot it for a day, it never got used. I could reuse it for Veterans Day or 4th of July or other holidays. So I encourage you, look for user-generated content, even for your library content. Ultimately, though, this is just another tip for planning ahead and having good content ready to go when you need it. All right, so types of content. So we're going to go into kind of the top types of content that we can see across platforms. What kind of types of content do you see often on social? So what do you see mostly? What resonates with you? What do you stop and look at when you see a post on any platform?
Making videos.
The tasty videos? What stops you?
I don't know. They're addicting.
Does anybody else stop for those? Anybody not stop for those? I think we all do. I think they've had case study after case study of just saying, we figured out how to make people stop and look. I watch more things about food, and I don't know how to cook anything, but it looks delicious, and I wish I could. But it gets our attention. So those kind of videos, other content that gets you to stop or you don't stop for? Cat stops or don't stop? The cats make you stop, or they make you want to keep going faster through it? Stop. Perfect. So cats, if you're trying to reach Phyllis, add cats to your content. What else makes you stop? Memes? Do people use memes in their organization or for their organization? Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, depending on your brand or what you're doing. So big things with content is what's possible on the platform. What works? How can it work? So Instagram, I've already done this twice on accident, and I haven't learned from it, so you guys learn from me. We made really cool GIFs for the football game for Twitter. GIFs work great. GIFs don't work on Instagram. They don't. You have to make a movie file. Just that file format does not work. Well, I failed to have my designer make a movie file 2 weeks in a row, so my GIF has just been a static image of something that was really cool and moved. It still worked. Anything football works for us. I'm lucky that way. But I had this really cool GIF that doesn't work on Instagram. So thinking through how the platforms work, what's interesting, what will get people to stop, and ultimately will it work on the platform. I have some GIFs that I try to put on Facebook, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. So I've just stopped using GIFs on Facebook because it's really finicky. You have to kind of drag them in and drop them on there. You can't schedule that content. So instead we make movie files, or we find other pieces of content to go with our stories or what we're posting so that it actually works. What have you guys tried? Types of content? Anything unique, different? Memes? Anybody use a meme that's worked? Was it for yourself or for an organization? Can everybody hear? So one of her accounts is a bar, and she's the most interesting man. Probably makes a lot of sense. That's bar-related, alcohol-related. Yeah. So I think ultimately it's trying to find new types of content. Anybody do live streaming yet? Well, tell us your quick story. Put you on the spot.
We really push it for our franchisees when they're in the store. Just talking about different, like introducing their store managers or introducing a new product, whatever it might be. But we've also had some failures with live stream, like not having actual service. So just disconnected right away for a 20-second video.
So you've learned from that. Live streaming, the key to that is having really good internet. And don't turn your phone. I had a client this morning use live stream, and half the video was like this. We looked sideways. So somebody ran up behind her and was like, turn it. And she's like, oh. It's way different. Do you have a short?
Yeah, we used it. I work for Emeritus, and we did it for Hannah Houston. We sponsored the Salt Labs game, so we went live.
So I'm going to put you on the spot on that, and you can share as much as you want. Why live over anything else? Because you could take photos, you could take videos, you could do other things. Was there a strategy or thought behind why live? So it was a strategic decision. So those who don't know, if you go live on Facebook, Facebook wants you to be using that platform. They're strongly encouraging it. So if you were on Facebook at the time, you'll get a notification that somebody that you follow or interact with has gone live. Shows up at the top for now. This could change tomorrow. But right now, anybody who's live, it's showing up high. You can interact with it. It also records, which is really nice, and stays on your timeline so people can watch it later and you can repurpose it. But I'm starting to see, just kind of trend-wise, that live streaming and video in general are winning with algorithms. I don't have direct stats with that, but from my experience with different personal clients and with the university, we're starting to see those areas kind of expand. We're starting to see that on Twitter as well with Periscope. Live streaming is kind of becoming one of those new authentic ways to be part of a brand or an organization if you don't have a Snapchat account or you don't have another tool that can do that for you. Was it easy? Pretty easy? When you
Some of the stadium has Wi-Fi, but it wasn't the best, so that was kind of tricky. But other than that,
Yeah. What else do I have on here? What are you interested in trying? Are there any things out there that scare you? Nobody's scared? What? Live. Why does it scare you?
Well, because with us, we are heavily regulated too, and I do get nervous that somebody might say something that they shouldn't.
Sure. You live streamed Hannah, right? Just Hannah, or did you do crowd, or what was kind of the focal point of that?
just Hannah, just to stay away from any other crowd.
Has anybody else live streamed? Few? Did you focus on something like the audience, or did you have somebody there as the focal point?
We use reporters on election night to do live election coverage.
Perfect. So were you scared that other people might say things that wouldn't work? Or would maybe be...
We use in-house our reporters. So
Okay.
it was from that angle it was safe.
Perfect. So, I mean, I think with that, if that's your fear, because I'm also a little bit afraid of live streaming just because I haven't done it personally. I've recommended it and encourage other people to do it, but I haven't had a story yet to tell. Control the setting. Can you move whoever you're focused on away from other people? Like you said, you had journalists or people that you trust and are probably paying to do it. Move in an area where you don't have that as a complication anymore, is my recommendation. Anybody else live stream? Ty?
We did a live Twitter, and we had one of the bots say, and we did just a set amount of time, so anybody could ask questions. And probably the one thing we were a little concerned about was his ability to answer and type and do all stuff. And so we actually had someone else type his answers. So they would do questions, he would answer, someone else would.
Awesome. So teamwork. Teamwork worked. Does anybody else do live tweeting or AMAs or anything like that? Has anybody had that experience? Dana?
We have our global conference, so we're definitely tweeting out as much as we can during the conference. Soundbites from speakers, and we brought in a couple of interns last conference.
Have you ever done the live tweeting with somebody from the global conference or just from the event? Like has one of your presenters been part of the Twitter chat or something like that as well?
We definitely encouraged all our speakers to use our conference hashtag, and everybody attending the conference to participate. So there was a lot of engagement, and we were trending on Twitter
Perfect.
for our local area.
Yeah, that's a win for everybody. All right. The other big question to think about too is what do you have the capacity to do? So this is where I recommend thinking through, can you create a meme? Can you create a GIF? Is a video even within your skill set? Can you find a video? Do you have people that can help with the Twitter chat or the live chat? Deciding those things up front and then figuring out who you might need or what you need. And this is where you can lean on other parts of your department or your organization to be helpful. Was it you that was typing in the live Twitter chat?
No, we had two people in there actually. We had a webmaster and one of our PR people. And so that way we could see the questions coming in, and if it was a little bit slow, we prepared general questions to keep them rolling, and that created more questions.
Perfect. So ultimately, anything live, you want to have kind of a plan for it. That's my recommendation. What are the questions that you'd ask when it goes quiet? Or are you in a controlled area so that there isn't a lot of noise? I'm going to walk through some of the platforms, kind of the main platforms. I only have 4 on here, but if you want to talk about other platforms, let me know. But ultimately, what's possible on the platform, this should make sense, hopefully, and you've probably seen it. but I like to remind people that Facebook is probably one of the most rich media possible platforms. You can do a lot with it. You can add those text links, videos. With video, you can do short videos. I posted a video that was 3 seconds long, had 500,000 impressions. 3 seconds. I've done videos where you add text on top to kind of tell the story when there's no sound or you have sound disabled or you can't hear. It's more accessible. So we've seen that video on Facebook for us is performing really, really well. So in our traditional sense, we normally have written stories. So what we've started to do is add a video component that tells the story without reading anything. I know that sounds like, well, why do you have the written story? Well, it's just the highlights. It's the important things that you could get the gist of it, but we always provide a call to action to go and actually read the story. That's probably 600 to 800 words. But if we want people to kind of be enticed or entertained and get them excited about the research that we're doing, we add that visual element first so that we can get them to our longer story. And probably the last 6 months we've been doing this, we've had great success. Just taking video B-roll, adding text on top of it, and telling the story. There's lots of stock photography that you can use. You can go and shoot video. We are lucky that we have a videographer that can do this work, but I know there's apps out there you can teach yourself. You can probably find a student that could help you, but there's lots of opportunities, especially with Facebook, to have really rich content to kind of stand out in the stream because it's so heavily focused on personal. Phyllis?
I'm wondering if Facebook now has something that works with people with visual impairments, because I'm following somebody who works with service dogs, and each time she posts a photo, then she posts a very, very detailed description of what is being seen in that photo, and then it has little carrots on either end of it. So it must be some sort of a signal that Facebook would read that aloud to their user.
Oh, I haven't seen that. I know with videos, you can add text files on the back end so that it's captioned, so that you can still add that captioning feature. But I haven't seen it. I don't know how it works in the sense of reading it. But that's something, accessibility. Do you have an answer? Do you know?
Where do you see the carrots? Is it in the post, or is it in something that she posts and then it changes?
It was she posted a photo, and then I think, I can't remember if it's in that below the photo or if it's in a comment where she posted a detailed description of the photo. It's a black dog, and the dog's tongue is hanging out, it's looking toward the left,
That sounds like a kind of markup you use for search engine optimization. I don't even know if I use that in an HTML document. I don't know how it would work putting it into a social media comment.
Yeah. I don't know if Facebook is there yet. I know some of their accessibility stuff is in progress, and they're trying to get better so that more people can be involved in the community regardless of their situation. And as marketers, as we create content, they're making it easier for us to provide captioning or I don't know about the read-through, but providing more context for the people who maybe are impaired in some of those areas. So if anybody has ideas on that, that might be a good research project for students or an area to expand on. That's something that I'm trying to figure out more because we don't want to isolate anybody. We want to make sure that as much content as we're sharing, the most people can see it and it be entertained by it or be part of the story. We started even on Snapchat. As we do videos, we add captions through the text feature to provide context for accessibility, but also because a lot of people watch Snapchat stories without sound on or they don't want the sound, so we can still get them the story without actually having to hear anything. Twitter, as we know, 140 characters for text. Provide links, image videos, and GIFs. So all the rich media has now been excluded from that account. So if you weren't aware, that's something that's new. It's really nice because you can write your 140 characters and still add a photo. The link doesn't. I wish it did. But the link is still part of your 140 characters. But you can add in any kind of rich media that you'd like. It's really helpful to have videos or have GIFs or have great photos with your text. It breaks up the content that you see in the stream. And you can still live stream through Periscope. So people are still doing that. There's still the opportunity for that. So if you don't have a Facebook page or Facebook Live isn't part of your repertoire, you could use Periscope. Anybody use that yet? You want to talk about it at all? Your experience with it?
Sure. So we recently added on to our building downtown, and we did a demo of the new building, and we live streamed it so that not only everybody in the office, but as well as our sister office in Omaha could see the demo at the same time, and they could tweet in their questions about certain things that were being added into the building.
Awesome. So really good use case of that. I mean, I think live stream has unique use cases. You have to kind of figure out, are people going to tune in? Will they want to watch it live? Is it different than recording it? And making those choices up front. But we have never had more opportunity and more options to create content really quickly. We don't have to be perfectionists. We don't have to be perfect in every platform or type of content, photographers or videographers, but we can be part of the conversation and have that content included based on our phones and the ease of use that Facebook and Twitter really primarily are providing us. There's talks of adding live streaming to Instagram, which I think would be really interesting. They added stories, which is great, and we'll get to that now. You can tell stories very similar to Snapchat. They show up in search. They show up at the top of your feed. And very similar to Snapchat, you can do videos, you can do photos, you can upload content. They just released the opportunity for verified accounts to provide links or further content. So if a lot of retail brands are doing this, you can watch the story and then you can actually slide up and buy the thing that you see, which is really direct call to action. Probably really helpful for those who are in consumer products if your account's verified, so work towards that. But they're trying to compete with other platforms. They're trying to make their platform all-encompassing so that we don't want to go into platforms like competitors of Snapchat. We can add a lot of different things with that. Captions can tell a story. A colleague at Princeton has really great Snapchat, very similar to Humans of New York. He has great photos, but then has long-form copy. It's probably, I think, 300, 400 words, which is kind of a lot for a caption that you'd see on Instagram. But I encourage you to follow Princeton and just see kind of how they tell those stories. They have a blog post explaining kind of the statistics on how well they've performed as well. I think it's really interesting and kind of something to model. Again, I think Instagram has to really focus on high visual content, so videos or photo, but you do have a lot of opportunity with that caption area. And you can tell even more fun stories, I think, with stories in general and using that feature. So those who maybe aren't ready to jump into Snapchat or don't feel like they have the audience there, you could still have the Snapchat feel, the authenticity, the quick storytelling, the stories that expire through Instagram. So how many have Instagram accounts for their organization? So ultimately you have, in a different package, you have Snapchat as part of your Instagram strategy, and you could start telling stories that way. And I have a storyboard that I'll show you here in a few minutes.
So why do you think Instagram does the stories now? Like, obviously they've probably got a little bit of the idea from Snapchat, but do you think Snapchat will ever just kind of fade out and Instagram will kind of take over that feature, or what's your kind of opinion on that?
I don't think they will fade out. I think what they saw is Snapchat's doing really great things for a very specific demographic, traditionally younger. We can do the same functionality for everybody. We already have this built-in base. We're one of the largest platforms. We have lots of money and engineers to develop this, so why not compete? And they have. I mean, they've admitted that they ripped off the idea. It's very similar. In a sense, it almost looks like it. They probably ripped it off enough to not get into legal issues. But to me, if you already have a very large user base that could maybe migrate to Snapchat or is interested in Snapchat, if you can roll it into your platform, why would you leave? So I think it's actually a win for marketers who don't necessarily have enough content expertise or bandwidth for adding Snapchat. You can do a lot of the same type of functionality in Instagram. There's metrics. You can try it for a while and see if it works. We don't use that as much just because I do a lot of Snapchat stories and don't want to do 2 stories in the same day. But I think that's an opportunity for those who are already doing well on Instagram to have a kind of more authentic, quick telling story that is different than the feed. We often will post a photo and has nothing to do with the actual story that we're telling. It allows us to tell a more holistic, complete story through this feature versus just the photo or video that we're posting in the feed.
Do you have any people that have good Instagram personalities like that? I've heard about them, but I haven't ever.
There are some institutions that do it really well. I look at Michigan. They have a great story. I follow a lot of just personal, people that I like. I'm a big foodie, so a lot of people just talking about their food experiences. So if you go into the Discover feature, those are now showing up as well. So you can kind of figure out and get ideas. That's what I like about Snapchat is the ones I can discover aren't just big brands. They're other people. That's the one difference I see between Snapchat is to discover other things, it's mostly large organizations that I don't relate to as well. But in Instagram, I can see the stories from the followers or the people that I already follow and get inspiration from them and figure out how to tell stories in the same fashion or a little bit different, or get inspiration on how they do something so that I can make it work for my organization. Cool. So Snapchat, is everybody familiar with what the platform is, or do I need to explain anything? Because I'm happy to do so. Okay. So photos, videos, stories, the VR filters. There was a big announcement this week with GeoFilters. They partnered with Foursquare, so GeoFilters should get even more specific and better. As marketers, we can start targeting through that. We can run on-demand filters, so filters that only show up in a certain location for a certain amount of time that we set. So we can have a lot of fun with this. McDonald's this last year invested in it, and the sense that they have a filter at every single location across the North America, which is a ton. Probably spending quite a bit of money, they're McDonald's, but they're seeing the audience spending time in the platform, so they want to be part of it as well. On-demand filters allow you to have statistics on how many people have used it, how many people have seen it, which I think is really helpful, and you can have the ability to pay a little bit of money to get your brand or your organization in front of a lot of people. It starts at $5 and goes up. The stadium, though, is really expensive, so don't try to do that. But most other places is really reasonable, between $5 and $20 for half a day or a day. I've gotten really smart on figuring out how to draw the GeoFilter lines to double up on. We did one for Thanksgiving, and we only paid for it once instead of twice because I drew a really thin line between buildings that connected it. I'm really proud of that, so that's why I talk about it. Instead of spending $10, I only spent $6. So I saved the university $4 in that. It was available for people to use on Thanksgiving, or for the Thanksgiving dinner in the dining hall. We had really good return on that, and it's just fun to inject your brand in kind of a scenario where people are, having fun with their friends and hopefully thinking about you a little bit. Is everybody familiar when I mention VR filters or text or stickers? Anything need to be described more?
Where do you go to buy those as a company?
Sure. So if you go on their website online. Okay. So instead of your phone, you go to snapchat.com. You can log in through your account, and then that's on-demand filters. You can also submit filters that don't cost any money. Those ones have a little bit more wide guidelines and restrictions that don't make too much sense to me, because they will accept some and decline others, and then they give you a list. If they decline it, they give you a list of 20 things you could have done wrong, but not what you did wrong, which makes it very difficult to know what to change. So we've submitted some for campus. I think there's 8 on campus, but we spend more time in the on-demand area because we can spend $5 and hit 30,000 people, or we can spend $5 and hit 10,000 people. The return has always been pennies, like per person. So it's been a really high return and allowed us to have targeted content in specific areas. So I'm excited to see what we can do with Foursquare, because those areas can get even more specific with locations versus just drawing on the map. So the virtual reality filters, where you can add a filter to your face, they just now released where you can add it to objects. So on election day, you could actually do a little buzzer and it squirted out things. It didn't just have to see a face. So there's filters that you can add to your snap that makes it more interactive and interesting, but it doesn't necessarily require a face. And then there are some that do require a face. So for Halloween, we did a fun story of different Halloween costumes. So we had an intern dress up with the filters, had people screenshot which one they thought was the coolest, and then they entered themselves to win a prize by participating. VR filters, technically you can create, but they're like millions of dollars, so probably yes. So when we do contests on Snapchat, it's all very manual. So you can see who's screenshot and look through them, and we just randomly pick a winner. So like in the actual data part of your story, and I can show you this, you can see how many people have viewed it and how many people have taken a screenshot. Within that, I can see all the people that have taken a screenshot, and then I pick a random winner from that. So that's how we kind of encourage engagement. And then we snap them and say, you won, tell your friends, and we'll mail you your prize. Yeah. All right. So for content creation, I know it can be overwhelming and confusing, but I really believe that there's probably an app for that. There's an app for everything. Whatever you're trying to do, you can probably find an app for low cost or free and do what you need to do. I have some favorites that I'll show you in just a minute, but I think there's probably always a way to try something. If you've seen somebody else do it, ask them how they did it. Maybe there's a really easy way. Maybe it's more complicated. Leverage the people and the connections that you have. That's my greatest accomplishment in finding cool ways to do things. It's just asking people like, hey, you tried that. That looked cool. What did you do? Oh, I did this, this, and this. And it's usually not as hard as we think it will be. Sometimes it's technology or things that we don't want to spend money on, but oftentimes it's just a new, clever approach to something, and we can really leverage and figure out how to copy or borrow their idea. If there's not an app, I encourage you to teach yourself. There are so many free programs. You can get into a program here and learn things. You can go online and find programs. There are tutorials for everything on YouTube. There are a lot of free MOOCs and other courses that you can take to teach yourself basic videography or photography or how to do a filter or design things. Snapchat actually released a new feature that online you can design those on-demand filters through their app. You don't have to actually be a designer. So you can use some of their drag and drop tool to build those. Or you can design them in Creative Suite or other apps as you have. But there are plenty of free tutorials and professional ways to really learn things. So as you have time or connections that you make, I encourage you to, if you want to try something new, there's probably a way to Google it and figure that out. I'm currently trying to figure out more analytics and listening, and that's where I'm spending my time to look at things and better understand what is working and what's not working. And there's a lot of free resources for that. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a good way to figure out how many followers you have on Snapchat? I know that's something we struggle with.
Sure. So I will show you a slide at the end, but all of our Snapchat content is kept in stories. So we don't snap people individually unless they snap us, which it doesn't happen often. So we only do 8 to 10 snaps in a story. So we found that if we do 8 to 10 total snaps, those can be photos or videos or any kind of content, that we have the highest return of completion rate. So starting the story and ending the story at the end snap, not in the middle. What we've found is if you look through the story, that we're averaging about 4,000 people per story to view things. So that's what we're kind of counting as our follower count. Because we're an open account, anybody can look at it, but consistently looking at those numbers story to story, we're averaging about 4,000 per snap. So that's where that's what we are indicating as our follower number. And we've started to see that number slowly grow. It's now like 4,100. So in a sense, we've grown 100 people. It's not exact science because there's not an exact, but that's the way we can best guesstimate how many followers that we have in that account, which I am doing a presentation on that in 2 weeks. And I was talking to somebody earlier this week and never really realized that we have such high loyalty. Every story is getting about the same amount of views. So we're seeing probably the same people repeat, and look at all of our stories. So I'm trying to figure out how to analyze that and really make that make more sense to other people, because to me it's loyalty. We're seeing people look at things over and over and over, and I don't know if I have the same loyalty on other platforms because I'm hitting more people, and I don't know if I'm hitting somebody once or hitting somebody 3 times. But for Snapchat, because we don't have a follower number, I'm assuming that it's the same people seeing all of our stories, which is a good indicator. So when we have really fun things, that's great. But when we have more serious things on campus or we need to get people to do something, come to an event, vote for something, we can use that platform to hopefully really motivate people to do something for us or on our behalf. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware of any of the adoption trends of older demographics with social media? Like, I'm just throwing out baby boomers.
I don't have it.
Aware of the latest trends are on adoption rates?
I think the Pew report just came out or is coming out. Pew does a report. Brian, do you know of another report on that? I think Pew probably has the most recent, because I always quote from them that at one, I think it was a 2014 report, was the one I was looking at, was like 30% of 55 plus was on Facebook, helping make the point that you have to know your audience to figure out which platforms make sense. So I think Pew Pew and Forrester, I think, are the 2 big organizations that are not connected to somebody that's selling something, that you could probably find those statistics. And I think they do some of the best job of breaking statistics down, not just age, but then also other demographics of gender and location, skill set in regard to how much education they've had, socioeconomic and other things. So I would look there, and I think Pew comes out every year or every 2 years, because the one I have right now for my class is from 2014. So I'm guessing there's something out there. But as I encourage, I always just Google, because I think there's somebody doing the research. You always have to qualify and see if it's a reputable source. But a lot of this stuff is being researched, and I think some of the bigger media outlets have reporters or researchers that they're partnering with to get that information out. Because we always see, like, Snapchat is so popular amongst college students. Well, what does that actually mean, and who does that include? We try to look at those reports in more depth than just that kind of headline. Because sometimes we see that, but Nebraska is very slow to adopt new things. So you might see that and then realize that that's like coming in 3 months to Nebraska. So that's usually when I look at those reports. It's always a few months. So we get a little bit of time to train for it and get ready and learn from other people's failures. Which brings me to my next slide. Don't be afraid to fail. This is something I've had personal trouble with because I don't like to fail. I don't think anybody in the room likes to fail. We don't train ourselves to fail. We train ourselves to win. We always want the A. But you have to be able to put yourself out there, try things, fail, learn from them. I think we all learn the most from the times we don't do as well as we think we could have. So try something new, learn from the experience, and really push yourself. I think there's lots of opportunity with social media to try it, figure it out. If it doesn't work, take it away. I don't really think you lose too much. Again, some industries would probably require you to fail smartly, but I think there's a way that you can actually be part of it and win instead of fail and try new things. So I encourage people to test stuff out and really push themselves and their teams to be pioneers on some of this stuff and really figure it out. Even if your organization hasn't done it before, why can't you be the leader? Why do we have to wait? We traditionally, again, are a little bit humble in Nebraska, and we find that we want other people to fail first so we can learn from it and then we can win. But I'm trying to figure out ways that we can try things first and be the example of somebody that did it really well, or maybe somebody that didn't, but at least will learn from it and always make something positive out of it. So some resources, because I promised that I would have them, and I will email this out, so please don't think you have to feverishly take this down. But I have some photo apps. Most of this content is free or really low cost. You can set up accounts for your team and share passwords. So photos, I think there's lots of native things, especially if you have an iPhone. But different apps that they do the same image over and over. Microsoft just came out with a new option for 360. Prisma and PicMonkey.com is just a bunch of free tools if you don't have Creative Suite or if you don't have access to some of those paid tools. Ripple is one of my favorite video ones because I don't know how to make video personally, but you can create little animations with it. You add a photo, a little bit of text. It looks really sweet. It works across most social platforms. There's not a lot of control. You have to give up a little control, especially when it comes to brand fonts, but you can use brand colors. And you can add logos if you have the paid account or the paid version. But I think sometimes there's an opportunity that you just need to produce something quickly. Still needs to look good, but you don't have the resources to help you out with it. I think there's some ways to interplay some of these apps. Same thing with layouts and GIFs. Photoshop, probably the best way to make GIFs, but again, if you don't have those skills, I used to just take photos and then add them in GIF Maker, and it will make a GIF for you. It'll make a video file for you. That one's free. That one's online. Giphy.com has a bunch of free GIFs as well. Not always things you need. I was trying to find Thanksgiving gifts the other day, and I didn't find what I liked, so I had to make one myself. But if you're in a pinch or you're just trying to figure out what's out there, these are great resources to start with. Emojis, if you want to add emojis quickly, or if you want to add emojis to your content if it makes sense for your brand. Emojipedia is a free tool that you can copy and paste from. Also, I just learned on Mac, if you control Command and Spacebar, it'll pop open a window with all of them. So if you're on a Mac, it's gold, because you can just double-click and it does it all in the same interface. And it works across most platforms, not just social. So you can add it to email, or you can add it to other things in your personal life if you think that's interesting. Multimedia, some apps that I think are really cool. Reporter is an app that I have practiced with personally, but have never published anything. But you can actually kind of report from a situation. You can do video, you can do photos, you can add voiceover, and kind of create a whole segment yourself from your phone, which I think is really interesting, especially if you're teaching or if you want to add new type of content but don't have full-on video equipment and lights and all that stuff. You can do it from your phone. Title Farm and Bubbly are both tools for adding cool text, and Bubbly adds is an option for 360 photos and videos. There's a lot of free stuff out there. It's worth trying. Try to do something a little bit different and catch your audience's attention. Any questions about content creation before we go to deployment? We're getting close to the end. Cool. So deployment, and this is just actually sharing the content. You've planned it, you've organized it, it looks great. How do you get it to your audience? So I like to think about what's your deployment frequency. When do things need to go out? What are you aiming for? This goes a lot back to your goals. How frequent should you be connecting with people? Is it 1 Facebook post a week, 3, 5, 10? I don't know your number, but understanding your frequency and looking at your metrics. A lot of times with the analytics, you can see when people are engaging with content the most. You can see what kind of content gets engaged with the most and try to replicate that. For Facebook, for us, for the university, we try to have 1 post a day. Sometimes we have 2 or 3, depending on volume. Twitter's a little bit more. We go 8 to 10 originals, and then we also try to add in some listening engagement with retweets and reshares. Instagram, for some reason this week I've posted 3 times, but I get more followers on the days I don't post. Don't really know why, but I just haven't posted. So I'm still seeing an increase in followers. So I'm not always depending on posting content to increase my reach and my engagement with those. What tools can you leverage? Everybody knows that most platforms you can schedule content. Is that a basic understanding? Okay. I went to a meeting last week and somebody said you can schedule on Facebook. And I smiled really big and told her yes. And I think I saved her whole life because she no longer had to post real time. I think she was struggling really hard with trying to get things posted real time. So almost every platform has some kind of native place where you can schedule content like Facebook does. Twitter has TweetDeck where you can schedule content. Instagram has an app called Later that you can post up to 30, I think, a month for free. There is a paid version. So depending on how frequent you're posting content, there are apps for that. The only caveat with Instagram is most of the time you can schedule it, but it still requires you to push publish. So I use a tool on Hootsuite that does it. It gives me everything I need, but I actually have to open it up in the app and actually hit publish. But I don't have to worry about the caption or any of that because it all copies and pastes from the tool. So it just sends you a little alert reminder. Later does the same thing. Don't set it and forget it. I used to say this a lot. Set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about things. And then really bad things happen in the country and you have a post that's really insensitive. So I encourage you that setting it is okay, but don't forget about it. If something happens, go in there and unschedule things. Don't schedule things out for too far in advance because then you have a heck of a time trying to unschedule everything. So really think through what is scheduled, when it's going. I fell down a few times doing this and had posts that went out that weren't necessarily insensitive but were poorly timed because situations and things had changed. Primarily it was, congratulations grads, we hope you enjoyed graduation at Memorial Stadium. Well, that year graduation was canceled. Really not my shining moment. So pay attention if you do schedule things or if things are scheduled. If you go schedule and then you go on vacation, make sure somebody else is available to unschedule things if something goes wrong. My example with that is we had like the Boston issue when we had the Boston bombing. We had to send out reminders like, please don't be posting a bunch of other stuff when the nation is kind of grieving under this situation. And people were like, thank you for reminding me. I completely forgot I had, posts about this, this, and this going out this afternoon. So just being conscious of what's going on around you and what's happening. And don't schedule too far in advance because you don't want to seem insensitive even if that wasn't your original intention. And don't forget about your team. This is where I go back to that team piece. Maybe you have people in your office who don't care about social media, don't really like social media, but they have a lot of free time or they're at their computers. Who says they can't schedule the posts? We've had people on campus that are in a secretarial or administrative role, and their part on the team is take everything that's approved and just post it because they are frequently at their desk because that's part of their responsibility to greet and welcome people when they come in a room or come into an office. So they had some downtime and agreed to do so. So we leverage them that we don't have to worry about scheduling because they would do it for us. Again, we can't schedule and forget, but we were able to leverage a little bit of their time to take a little bit of time off of us. So don't forget about all the people that you could involve. Again, there's a little risk because they have to know the passwords, but likely if they work for you and they work with you, they're not going to do anything malicious. And if you've trained them well and worked with them and talked to them, that you guys all should be in pretty positive way and get more things accomplished across the team versus having to do everything yourself. One thing I found this year, so I have Snapchat listed at the top for a storyboard. We storyboard a lot of things now, thinking through process, thinking through how things could work, especially when it comes to video. What are going to be our snaps? Like I mentioned earlier, we only do 8 to 10 per story. So what does this look like? What's the caption? Is it a video? Is it a photo? Is it a VR filter? Are there other things? What is the holistic story we want to tell start to finish so that we don't miss things? But it also allows us to really think through, like, could we film a video? Maybe. Do we have the capacity to do that? Do we want to interview a student? Do we want to show a building? Do we want to be in a space? This has saved us a lot because we've been able to think through the whole process. I have interns that will think through the whole process and then bring it to me, and then we'll talk about it. So they spend 30 minutes, in a sense, writing the story, and then we can spend 10 minutes perfecting it, and then they can go shoot it. So I still have a little bit of oversight. I have an involvement in the process, but I don't have to do everything. This has made my life way easier because they have the capacity and the time to go shoot it, but I still have a slight sense of art direction or directing what's going to be accomplished in the story. We can think through it. This is nothing fancy, and this is not new, but it's just something that we've really stuck with, and we try not to do a story without a storyboard. This also allows my interns to plan stories weeks in advance or a few days in advance and then leave them for me to actually shoot. Like, they're not here on Friday, so I'll shoot those stories, but I have their storyboard to go off of.
How did you determine 8 to 10 snaps?
So for us, we were doing stories that were kind of all over the place with numbers. What we started to see is once we got past 8 snaps and eventually 10 snaps, we saw a giant cutoff of people actually continuing the story. So we looked at our, for 1 month, we looked at our metrics of stories and realized that once we hit that threshold, our numbers dropped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people not finishing. So anything we said after that, we were missing lots of our audience. So we decided that let's shoot for 8 to 10, and we're seeing right now about a 90% completion rate. So we know people are starting and finishing where we want them to. And that's just looking at the data. So again, not something I came up with, my intern who loves data did, but it works. And that's how we've been able to kind of perfect it. It's also made things way more manageable. We have to think more strategically on how we're going to tell a story because we only can do 8 to 10 snaps. So instead of saying, oh, you have 20 or 30 or have no restriction, stories drag on, things don't work, you lose arc, you lose the momentum of the story. So we found that this works. I'm not saying this would work for everybody, but look at the data and see where people are starting to drop off and refine from there and see if it continues to work for you. Is there a question? Acacia? So we have a lot of prescribed stories because that's the only way I can get things done right now. We have 4 stories a week that are planned. They're around themes. So Mondays we do posters of campus and events that are happening so that people can kind of see what they want to take screenshots of and what they want to go to or attend that week. Tuesdays we started doing student takeovers, so students kind of tell their story or their perspective of campus. Wednesdays we do how-tos, which is a collaboration with people across campus and how to do something. So how to be well with wellness or how to recycle on campus. We just did that with our sustainability group. So we do that every Wednesday. And then Friday we always do a fun kind of contest where we encourage people to screenshot an option, and if they screenshot it, they enter to win a prize. So those 4 every week, we know we have to plan for them, and then we add in stories as things happen. So if there's an event or something else comes up or we need to talk about something, we know if it needs to get in front of students that that's probably the platform to do so. So we try to work it in. Wednesday we had an international food bazaar and we had a student takeover, so I couldn't just take the story to the bazaar. So I encouraged the student who was doing the takeover to go to the food bazaar and add it to her story. So we were still able to accomplish the idea of telling that that really cool event on campus that happens once a year, but integrating it through the student's perspective. I also told that story through Instagram stories because I still had that open. So I could still supplement there, and we had some good results as we're starting to do more stories in Instagram. So for deployment, plenty of native platforms. You can do a lot through native. You don't necessarily have to have a third-party tool. Hootsuite has free, pro, and enterprise, depending on your budget and your experience and what you would like to do. Sprout Social is another one that I've used. They do have a nonprofit and an education rate. If you're in a nonprofit or education, always ask if they have a rate, because they usually do. Later, for Instagram or repost for Instagram, if you're trying to find an app that will actually repost your photos and add that little piece of attribution on it and say the author's name, it will do that and then actually push it over to Instagram for you. So you can repost really quickly through that app. And then my other tool is old-fashioned storyboards, thinking through a concept on paper before you actually move it to a platform. Pro tip here, smart planning will make your life easier. So I have interns that will go away over Thanksgiving. They'll go away over winter break, so I can get them to plan some of those stories ahead of time. They've done most of the heavy lifting and the planning. I just have to then do the shooting. So I split my time with only having to shoot instead of having to do it all myself, which for me is really nice because I can spend a fraction of the time in the amount of work, but have still a really good return on the project that we're working on. Content analysis, I know this is everybody's favorite area. I'm slowly learning it it should be part of mine. How many of you analyze the data that you analyze the channels, analyze any kind of data of your social media programs? Good. We're seeing some hands. We're going to see more hands, hopefully. I will admit, I don't like to produce reports or data for the sake of it. So there's been times when I haven't because nobody's asking for it. I'm pretty conscious of how my content is performing and try to replicate things that are working and get rid of things that aren't. But I'm a big fan of not doing extra work for just the sake of it. So please don't just print a report or do a report just because you think you have to. Make sure there's some kind of goal or do it for yourself around what you're interested in. That's what I'm doing reports right now for, is what I'm interested in and what I want to see work. I'm still very conscious of the big picture, but I don't have anybody above me saying I need X, Y, and Z. If they ask for it, I know how to do it, and I know how to make sure I can to provide that report. But I think reporting to report is really a waste of your time. And we already know that most people don't love data, so don't put yourself in a situation that you're not going to like just because you think you need it. Ask questions. Ask of your boss or your supervisor or anybody above you what they're looking for, what they need, or provide them what you think they need. And that's kind of the area that I fall in right now, is I'm providing the areas that I think we should be looking at, understanding that it could evolve and it should evolve as time goes on. So really simple on my analysis. What are your goals? What did you want to accomplish? Are you moving towards that bigger goal? Are you moving towards individual content goals? My example, as I mentioned earlier, are you trying to get people to an event? Did people show up? Did people click on the link? Did people share a post that you wanted them to share? Did they interact with the video that you wanted them to watch? Are you hitting the metrics that you were hoping to hit? What's the point of your analytics program? Why are you doing it? And I think this is where we fall down a little bit because we don't take a bigger step back and figure out what's the point. Is it to influence future content? Is it to make a VP happy or a president happy? Is it to do it just to do it? Is it to do it to fully understand what your program is doing well and keep doing that and find out what your program's not doing well and get rid of those things? That's the area I fall in. We look at what type of content's performing for individual content goals and then move on from there. So I don't have giant reports at the end of the month. I just look at content once a week and try to figure out what's going on and what's working. How did the content perform? And then how can I tweak it or repurpose it for future types of communication that we'll probably have. Our program is very similar week to week. The same type of announcements, the same type of content. So it's just finding out how it resonates with our audience and then kind of repeating it until it stops resonating. What's important for your organization and how often do you report? Again, I worked at Swanson for 2.5 years, and every month I did a report for somebody. Every month I sent in the report. Every month I billed them for the report, and they never asked anything about the report. So it's a very good moneymaker if you are trying to make money. I don't run a small business, so I can't say that helps. But I would think it makes more sense to spend your time in not just running a report, but analyzing the report, understanding what the data tells you, so that you can make more strategic decisions. So when our clients ask us for reports, we always say, this is what's working, this is what's not, and this is what we recommend that we change. Because we want to make sure those recommendations are where we spend most of our time, because that's beneficial to the client. That's what they get. If they see followers increase by a certain percentage, cool. If they see a bunch of retweets, great. But ultimately, what does that mean for them? So we always try to turn that into recommendations. And most of our reports, when we do reports, are housed in recommendations for how to make things better and how to expand the reach or the goals of our projects. And then how do you report? Is this a formula that you have in a spreadsheet? Is it an actual PDF? Do you have a conversation? What we do on the reports that we have to report, we have a one-pager. Our client said we do not want to see more than one page. So we pull out the most important things that she would be interested in. We pull out a little bit of graphs so that she can see data, so that if somebody asks why she's spending money, she can show them. But she's asked us to keep them to one page. That doesn't mean we do it one page, 8-point font, and fit everything. That means we have to be strategic in what we're reporting and helping her understand. And we found it's hard to do that, but once you figure it out, it's easy to replicate. And we've found more value in reporting because we're making changes or seeing areas that are performing well versus just reporting to report. Because we can do that. Anybody can report to report, but to me, I would rather spend my time reporting to do something that is going to be beneficial for the organization. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so for the client that we report on, we have like an InDesign file. Again, I got budget this year, so we have some templates built in Hootsuite that pulls the numbers so that we can spend more time looking at the numbers and figuring out what that means. And I'll show you an example of that in just a minute. But to me, I encourage you to figure out what you should report on, how you should report, and then build a template so you don't spend as much time pulling data, but more time analyzing data and providing recommendations or next steps. I think it's Google that has the report that it's, you should be spending 20% of your time pulling data, 30% of your time reviewing it, and then the other 50% of your time should really be providing recommendations. You should be spending about half or more in figuring out what the data means versus just trying to collect it. So there are ways to speed that up based on budgets and kind of tools and skills that you have. To me, a pro tip, you can have both platform and content-specific goals. So you might have a goal of our Facebook audience needs to reach so many people or we want to increase followers, but each piece of content can also have a goal. This is where it gets a little bit harder to report on. I like to take content based on themes and put them together. So if I have a news story, I put news stories all in one bundle and say our news stories have done X. Or if I take event announcements, I put them in a bundle and say our events have done X. Because it's really difficult to have everything by itself, or you have giant reports that nobody wants to sift through and nobody can read. You want to make sure that your audience is actually, or the person asking for the report can actually understand it, because they're not experts and they're not really wanting to read 15 pages of information. Some simple resources for this. Native platforms most have built-in analytics now. Instagram, if you have a business page or you update to a business page, you can see analytics for your account. So update if you haven't yet. Twitter has built-in analytics, so does Facebook. Snapchat has some. They're pretty limited, but there are some analytics involved. Again, Hootsuite, Sprout Social, and then screenshots are key for Snapchat to really see what's working. The same thing with Instagram stories. That's not built into the reporting tool just yet. So just a few slides. So to your point, I have a digital sign in my office. We have 10 tiles. We build this. This is not real time. We build these each week to see how we're performing. So what are our video views cross-platform? Our hypothesis right now is video is going to outperform everything else, and we will continue to have a larger reach if we increase our video content. So we are tracking this. This week we are down a little bit. It says 33%. But each week we're trying to see, is video content worth it? Because it takes us more time. It requires more resources. It requires us to ask other people in our office to help out. But right now we are seeing that we are getting way more views with video than we are other pieces of content. How many screenshots are we getting on Snapchat stories? That's a piece of engagement. That's our increase. That's down this week, but that's because we missed taking screenshots of the data from one of our stories. So the stuff goes away after 24 hours. So if you don't take screenshots of it, you could lose it. And so sometimes our data is not complete because I forget on Saturday mornings to wake up early and take screenshots. The same thing with average completion rate. So we try to pull in data that we're interested in. Like I said, I don't have somebody above me asking me for this. I'm interested in knowing how these things are performing. So we've built little modules, and I have my intern pull this data so that we can look at it each week and make sure that we're still trending up. Yes, sir? So that's like the million-dollar question for everything. I haven't been asked that question, but I know I could figure out a way to explain it to them. I don't have content that directs to sales, so I don't have content to tell them how that works. If I did have content, I would figure out, is there a way to say, when I shared a link, did they go back to our website and how much time they spent, and then what's the conversion on the website? So it's thinking through a little bit more specific to those goals, and that's where I encourage to understand what are the goals, and then how can you match that with your social media program. Our program right now doesn't have high-level specific achieve X goal. It's really share as much we can and build a bigger brand, build a reputation. I'm hoping as with our new director, we can be a little bit more focused on that and understand what those goals are. But right now, I'm only reporting this for myself, and anybody who comes in, I can explain it to them and what it means. But right now, I don't have somebody asking, you know, what does that mean to the bottom line or something like that. I haven't compared it on a bigger scale because right now we are the smallest in the Big Ten. So it's really hard to find, Iowa State is close, but it's really hard to figure out where we fall based on resources. We have 25,000 students. Most of those schools have 50 plus. So I look at it in a comparative model of I have 25,000 followers, but what's my engagement rate for the week? Is it a high enough percentage for me that I'm thinking that 3% engaged from 25,000, that's a good rate for me. So it's hard for me to benchmark against other people because I don't have like a full list of competitors that I would say are equal. And again, nobody's asking me for that yet, so I'll have to figure it out once people start asking or they see this video and realize I don't have it. So other things we just like to, Phyllis.
Based on your analytics, what's the ideal length of video for your art, your talk art?
Under 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. So this is what this is. Here, 30-second video views. So we're seeing original views and repeat views. I try to look at all the videos because we do less videos, but I can see where people are falling off. So when somebody says, I want to make a 2-minute video, I cringe a little bit. I know that 2 minutes sometimes is necessary to get the message, but I always encourage them, like, we have 30 to 45 seconds at the beginning, and that's where most people are spending their time. So we need to get most of the message at the beginning of the video, at least on Facebook. YouTube, you can do the same analytics. You can see how long people are watching something and start to measure the trends or see where people are falling off in your videos. Sometimes you can't win with people. We're working on a video right now. It's going to be 2 minutes and 12 seconds because that's the audio track that we have to work with. So regardless of what the data says or what I want, I know it's going to be 2 minutes and 12 seconds because we can't change the audio. So I kind of just have to work with that. I'm hoping it's good enough that people will finish it, but I know that most of the time it's 30 seconds or less.
With limited resources, how do you determine what content you would upgrade to being a video?
I usually upgrade things that I know I have assets for. So like oftentimes if I want to upgrade a news story, I talk to our video team and say, what do you already have? How can we repackage or repurpose things you already have? Because that's way easier than going out and trying to shoot new things. So that's where we spend a lot of time figuring out. We get lucky in the sense, oh, you already shot something, we can repurpose that, or we can use some stock things that overlay with that, and we can tell that story. I don't have, again, initial, like, these 5 stories have to be elevated. If we did, then I'm hoping that I'd get more resources and more time to package that up and make sure it's really well done. Most of the videos that I'm making or have access to make are repackaging of original content or other content that I can package and to deliver for that story. So other just analytics things, again, this is just Snapchat filters that we did for Thanksgiving. So we realized that East Campus, again, it only cost me $5, but not the most views or uses. But Selleck and Cather Pound, quite a few views, quite a few uses. This was only available for 3 hours on that last Thursday. But we can actually start to measure, are on-demand filters worth it? Are we seeing areas? I likely would probably just not use East Campus next year, based on numbers, but I know based on politics, I always need to include all my students, so I'm going to still do it. So it makes it up over here, and for $5, not terrible. If it was more than $5, I would maybe have to make a better judgment call on how I'm going to spend that money.
Do you ever promote that you're going to be doing these ahead of time?
Yep, so these are actually the promo images that we run. So we try to run them on Instagram and Twitter to encourage people to know that they're available on Snapchat, or most of the time, if there's a filter, there's a story with it. So we'll use the filter in the story so that people hopefully will catch on that that's available. We found that promotion is key to really let people know, especially in crowded areas or really popular areas, because there's 14 to pick from. If you don't know what's there, you're not looking for it, you're probably not going to find it. This is just an example of a storyboard and then how we pull the data out of it. So we had 15 screenshots for this story, almost 30,000 views, and then almost 90% completion rate. So this sits on a board again in my office so that I can make sure that we're trending here. If that starts to dip in the completion rate, which is my main point, my main goal, I can figure out where in the storyboard it dipped and did we do something wrong. Right now we're keeping a very solid trend, so we haven't had to pivot or fix anything yet. But we try to make sure that we always have a storyboard so it matches the data so that we can go back and fix things that aren't working, especially if our numbers start to dip off. Or if we start to grow, where's the growth coming from, and try to make some predictive decisions. This is some of the data that we can now pull from Instagram, engagement, reach, and impressions. Right now in the fall, we are highly skewed because anything football wins every week. So it's hard to say what kind of content always works, but we know which piece of content had that. It's always fun when they are different, and we try to figure out why. We haven't figured out why yet, because the fall is always heavily dominated if there's a football game. One project we're trying to work on right now is to better understand, is user-generated content a graphic or a video? Which one does better? We use the same caption. We've been trying this for 3 weeks right now. Our numbers are always different each week. So we haven't really found out, does a user-generated content actually get more views or more interaction than a video? Or is a graphic okay? Our goal of this was to understand if we have X message to deliver, what type of content to create. Right now, there is no trend line. There is no actual way to say this worked and this didn't. All we found is actually the earlier we've posted a photo, the better it's, or the earlier we posted a piece of content, the better it's performed. So there's no balance. My hypothesis was user-generated content would always be better because I think it's more authentic and interesting. But right now we're not seeing that. Sometimes graphics work. Sometimes video works. Not necessarily in this example, but we're trying to do this again for a month. Every Tuesday we kind of have this concept to see if we can see how people are interacting with our content so that we can plan to create that type of content for the future. Hopefully we'll get an answer, but I don't think we will. I think the algorithm is really screwing with us a little bit. So quick recap before we go. Social media goals, audience identification, that's your first one. I hope if you didn't listen to me the rest of the time, that's where you focus your time. Understand your audience, understand what are your goals, because that will get you, hopefully, to the rest of this. Base your channels off of those things and start thinking how you can build your team, how you can connect with more people for that content planning and creation. Same thing with deployment and analysis. You can use different people on your team that can help with these parts. You can do it all yourself and make sure it's all really intentional and focused around what you want to get out of it, or what you need to provide to other people so they get something out of this as well. If you have more questions, please stick around and ask them. We have about 4 minutes left in the timed session, but I'll be around for a few minutes. I do have to run back to my office because we're having an open house. So thank you very much for joining me today, and I look forward to chatting with you.